answer of my parliamentary party to that question. And I accept that answer with good grace. Every decision I've taken has been about putting the country I love first. That is why I will resign as leader of the Labour Party.
Well, you know what? In the end, he did do the right thing, and there were some achievements, and he's an honourable man, and he cared about public service. Guys, that's not what happened just now. In the last half an hour, Keir Starmer resigned, and he resigned because he was pushed. Most of his issues, most of the things which have damned him from, let's face it, within days, within weeks of him becoming Prime Minister back in July 2024, or of his own making. They were things he chose to do, cutting the winter fuel allowance, damning everybody who wanted to have a public inquiry on the grooming gangs as jumping onto the far-right bandwagon, the two-tier policing after the Southport riots. This man brought it on himself. He was not a good Prime Minister.
There was two things on that manifesto. One was a picture of Keir Starmer and the word change. Well, promise made and promise delivered in that sense. Let's be honest. But look, I mean, I don't really want to make light of it, but I am cheesed off, Julia, because what we promised in opposition was competence, and it's been anything but. I'm embarrassed. I'm really, truly, honestly, I am embarrassed, because I did think we would be competent. We've not been.
I've no idea whether there'll be a contest or a coronation. But what I do know is the British public have simply had enough of political parties chopping and changing their leaders at will. We vote for somebody in a general election to be our Prime Minister. We expect them to serve their term. And barring ill health or exceptional circumstances, what is going on here, frankly, is reminiscent of a banana republic that has totally devalued the very process of general elections and democracy. We at Reform demand a general election.
The question my party is asking now is whether I am best placed.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, good evening to you. It is Petrie here with you through until 1 o'clock, and of course at midnight. It is your chance to talk back, and I know it's been very, very busy today, so maybe you haven't had the opportunity to do that. Well, this is a full hour that is dedicated to you, so please do get involved. I want to know, basically, are we ungovernable in this country? What is going on? This will be the 7th Prime Minister in 10 years, so since Brexit, really, which is the anniversary of tomorrow. But it just struck me, really, that we're never... Look, this democracy I will always support, because I think the idea we can get rid of a Prime Minister mid-term is absolutely brilliant. I mean, there's a lot of people in America who wish they had exactly the same rights as we do, or as the country does, to sort of make our feelings felt and known, and I completely support that. But it is extraordinary to me that we've had so many Prime Ministers now, and yes, a lot of them were rubbish. So either we're the wrong people are getting the job in the first place, or we are being too demanding. Is it because we demand too much too quickly? You want to see change straight away. And with Keir Starmer, definitely we thought, right, the Tories have gone after 14 years. We're going to now just rock and roll through all these changes that need to happen. And of course, 2 years in, and we saw a lot of U-turns, we saw a lot of stupid political decisions which I will never understand. I will never, ever understand the winter fuel allowance fiasco, because that was the beginning of this disaster. It all started from there. And it was a self-inflicted wound. It was absolutely unnecessary, as Keir Starmer stood in front of us and punched himself in the face. It was extraordinary. It was breathtaking in its stupidity and unnecessariness, right? So here we are now, fast forward, not that far, a couple of years, and we're still, either he didn't communicate it properly or we're not seeing the changes that we wanted to see, and we wanted to see them really, really quickly. The trouble is that politics moves very slowly, particularly with big decisions and big things that are expected to happen. So are we too demanding? Do we demand too much change too quickly? Are the wrong people getting the job? Are we ungovernable? Because if Andy Burnham, and it does look like it will be Burnham. I mean, as much as anybody says, oh, I do believe it'll be a coronation. We saw very much today that Wes Streeting, who was the #1 challenger, really, he's backed off and said he stands behind Andy Burnham. So there would have been some horse trading going on there. And Andy Burnham's now in Westminster, so there'll be horse trading going on with other people who think they might want to challenge him. He wants a coronation. Whether that's the right thing for him or not, I don't know, because they might come back to bite him, actually. It's probably better if he won it. Of course, you've got other parties now calling for a general election. Andy Burnham himself did when Rishi Sunak took over the Tories and said this is not what people voted for. I doubt very much, in fact, I'd put money on it, that he will not be calling any kind of general election should he or when he becomes Prime Minister. So there's a lot to talk about here. We've got the big beasts coming in to discuss all of this with us. Petrie Hosken will be here. He's got an encyclopedic knowledge of all of these things as we go through the papers. I'm absolutely thrilled to say I've got Vicky Price, who's here to talk to us about the economic implications of a Burnham premiership. So we'll be talking about that, and also the uncertainty in the markets at the moment with what's going on. Scott Lucas joins us to see how Burnham will fare on the international stage, and again how we're viewed on the international stage, having all of these chops and changes of prime ministers. So we're going to be looking at the international stage as well. But before that, following months of mounting pressure, of course, the PM, Keir Starmer, officially announced his resignation outside 10 Downing Street today, as his departure was triggered by Andy Burnham's recent Makerfield by-election triumph. Burnham immediately launched his premiership bid, becoming the front-runner to succeed Starmer as Prime Minister. A former Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, as I said, withdrew from the race and endorsed Burnham to foster party unity. That's what he's saying anyway. There's been a deal done, I'm telling you. Clearing the path for an expected coronation. Today, Burnham travelled to London and was sworn in as an MP for Makerfield. But what has been happening behind the scenes over the weekend? We're talking about big beasts of politics. I'm thrilled to say we're joined now by John Boothman, political correspondent at the Sunday Times in Scotland. This is a day to be in politics, isn't it, John?
Listen, it's been an amazing, really, few days. Who would ever have thought that someone could win a by-election, not being in Parliament beforehand, and end up in, what are we talking about, by July the 15th being the Prime Minister? You know, it's a very, very unusual set of circumstances, hence people calling for something like an election, though in reality, I think you're absolutely right. I don't think that's going to happen. One of the things that the SNP in Scotland were calling for today was an election, and everybody knows the SNP don't have the money to fight one. But, you know, there's a whole variety of considerations there. But, you know, I've had an interesting day talking really to lots of Labour people, a mixture of sadness about Starmer going, because they do have some residual gratitude towards him for changing the Labour Party, taking them to victory 2 years ago. But to be fair, a bit of a sense of relief that the game's over, that by and large the suggestion there might be a coronation probably suits them. There's been too many mistakes from Starmer, no matter what his achievements. But, you know, there's not really a lot of sentiment in politics. The king is dead. long live the king, in this case, the King of the North, by the looks of it.
By the looks of it. Well, just that point on it being a coronation. The public don't tend to like that, but then we don't have a say in who would be elected anyway, do we? It's the Labour Party members that choose the next leader. And the argument is for no election, no immediate general election, is we didn't vote for Keir Starmer, we voted for Labour.
Look, you can look at that a number of ways. The public also don't like unnecessary elections. So I think, you know, given the state of public opinion at the moment, I think that if you look at Burnham's probably, and is in any of the opinion polls that we've seen before, more popular than Starmer. I think the thing about the short timetable is a problem for Burnham. I think he'll obviously be able, and I think over the weekend or maybe the past week, there have been talks between some of the people who may have stood against him, who now won't stand against him, no doubt, jobs and offering stuff there. But the difficulty is, if he's going to be the Prime Minister by July the 15th, what's the plan? And the big criticism at the end of the day of Starmer is that he was great at winning elections, but when he got into number 10, he didn't know what to do.
Yeah, well, I mean, maybe Andy Burnham will. It's not his first time in Westminster, is it? Even though he wasn't an MP at the time and had to go for that by-election. But he has got experience of Westminster and the red tape and the politics of Westminster, perhaps more than Keir Starmer did.
Look, I think perhaps more than just about anybody in the cabinet, I think there's a lot being made by some commentators suggesting that because he's coming from being the Metro Mayor of Manchester, that somehow or other that this will be a big jump up for him to do the job as Prime Minister. I think they forget that he was an MP for 16 years before. He was a minister, including in the cabinet, for 5 years. He held the post of Culture Minister. He was the Shadow Secretary, the Chief Secretary to the Treasury. He was the Health Secretary. You know, this guy's been round the block. And not just round the block. I think, you know, one of the attractions of him for people in the Labour Party, not just that he won the by-election last week, defeating Reform in pretty difficult circumstances, is that he's got experience. As I say, he's been round the block. He's got a personality, and that's something that Starmer didn't. He's a very good and experienced communicator. And I think he's also, if you look at what happened in Manchester, albeit, you know, in a smaller scale than the UK, he's had a lot of success in Manchester. It's the fastest growing economy, part of the economy in the UK. You know, people talk about what he's done in terms of regulation and buses, and but you know what he's done in the economy has been pretty important over the last decade. So if he can bring any of that to bear and not make the mistakes that Starmer made, and maybe that's where his experience will come in useful, then maybe he can put Labour back on some kind of track to winning the next election. So he's got, what, just over 3 years to do that. So, as I say, I think welcome by and large by most Labour members. Look, there might be a slight chance of a contest. Darren Jones's name has been thrown around as a possibility. He's the guy who's been advising Starmer. Some disgruntled Starmer people thinking of putting him forward, but difficult to see that materialising, and if it does, he'll get stuffed. Yeah,
he will. I mean, he's not necessarily going to get the 81 people, is he? That he needs that magic 20%. The thing with Andy Burnham, though, he's going to have to be very careful about how he balances his cabinet, isn't he? Because he is seen as being, you know, very left-centre, you know, left of centre. So he's going to have to, I mean, perhaps that's why Wes Streeting has agreed to back out, because he's seen as being more sort of centre-rightish of the Labour Party. And maybe the job of Chancellor is in the offing for Wes Streeting if he didn't challenge Andy Burnham. Because these are the horse trades that go on, right?
Absolutely, and I think these are some of the discussions that will have been going on over the past week. Horses for courses, these appointments are really important. You've identified, I think, probably the most crucial one, which is the job of Chancellor. Does Rachel Reeves keep it? In that respect, it would spook the markets less. Streeton could be a possibility. John Healy's name's been mentioned as another possibility. And again, you know, the other name that's been mentioned is Ed Miliband. Now, you can take or leave Ed Miliband. He might be popular in some bits of the Labour Party, but I think if you're going to keep the markets on side, he might be the most difficult choice to be the Chancellor.
But he's close to Burnham, isn't he? They're personally close. They're mates. They've supported each other through everything.
I think that's right. But I think the whole net zero thing is really crucial in all of that. He certainly wouldn't be popular north of the border, Ed Miliband, as the Chancellor, if he's going to stick to that. You look at what happened in the by-election in Aberdeen South last week. The other jobs that I think are interesting are obviously that defence job. You know, again, could John Healy come back to that? Could Wes Streeton go into that as a possibility? Because again, you know, this is a big, big job. But look, this is where we get to all of these crucial areas. One, how do you avoid spooking the markets? Secondly, where do you find the money for defence, for example, you know, to support that defence investment plan? Thirdly, what do they do about welfare? I think in the long term, obviously, Streeton would like, Burnham would like to reduce the welfare bill, but I don't know that he'll be doing anything in the short term about that, because he's got backbenchers that want something different. So, you know, these are all big, big issues. There's, you know, I saw that they were talking about Brexit earlier. The European summit's been postponed, which was supposed to be somewhere where we were going to agree some kind of closer ties with Europe. So we need to make sure and see what happens with that. On immigration, though, other big issue, I see that he looks as if he might stick with Shabana Mahmood.
I think so, yeah.
Stick with these policies. So it's like the irony of all of this is that the faces are changing, the Prime Minister's changing, but the new Prime Minister's still going to face the same old issues that Starmer faced.
I mean, and that's the issue, isn't it? Is it going to be the same old blocks from the backbenchers and things? Because he said he's not going to shirk, he's not going to shy away from fixing the or doing something with the welfare bill. But if he cuts welfare, then he's going to have the same problem as Starmer had when he tried to cut welfare. If he tries to get more money from taxation, he's already said he's going to stick to the fiscal rules set by Rachel Reeves, but he didn't say he's going to stick with her. I think it'd be very unlikely if he did. But he's also flip-flopped a bit, hasn't he? You know, he said, I'd like to see us return to the EU in my lifetime. And then during the Makerfield election, he was like, no, you know, that would be way down the line. You know, I mean, he's already playing politics with us.
Yeah, look, he's flip-flopped on that. He's flip-flopped on immigration.
Yeah.
He used to certainly favour a much more liberal approach, like many other people in the Labour Party. He's flip-flopped on that whole issue of single-sex spaces.
Yeah.
He previously supported self-ID for trans women using female spaces, but that's changed as well. You know, but I think we get back to that whole thing about the economy. You know, I know he said already that he'll stick to the fiscal rules, but I hear a lot of voices talking about maybe there being some tweaks or some changes to the fiscal rules, which might allow him to get more money to spend on, you know, something like defence.
Yeah.
Another idea for defence I saw Neil Kinnock talking about on the radio earlier is the possibility of having defence bonds that could be issued. You know, I think what the electorate needs to see, though, from Burnham is something tangible, some evidence that there's some kind of change. You know, know, whether that's more money for defence or, you know, people need to see the factories building drones. They need to see the orders for ships. They need to see investment, that things are visible that they can see. I think they would also like to see something done about energy and energy prices. You know, we'll no doubt have those on the way up in a few months' time when Ofgem announces, you know, different caps. And the other thing I think you know, people are starting to get worried about is that whole situation with the number of people who, for a variety of reasons, particularly young people who are not taking up opportunities in the workplace. You had that big report by Alan Milburn a few weeks ago. You know, there are so many problems and such a big agenda, and this is why Burnham needs a plan, and that short time is really, really important, that he needs to be able to say, right, here are the 3 or 4 things I am going to do.
Yeah.
And then in doing them, people need to see, literally physically see, right, what that actually means.
Yeah, and as I was saying earlier on about how many PMs we've had in such a short amount of time because we're impatient, he's got to do these things quickly. So he's got to pick some things that he can achieve, I mean, really quickly, like September, October, he's got to be able to go down. And even with the budget coming up in October, there's got to be something that he's giving or taking away in terms of taxation. If he's going to tax the wealthy, if he's going to start a land value tax, which is deeply unpopular, particularly in the South. And if he's going to do things, he's got to hit the ground, literally hit the ground running, and we need to see those changes quickly. Otherwise, everyone's going to say, well, what's the point?
No, I agree with that entirely. Look, the other thing it's worth saying, and you've raised quite an interesting point there about different parts of the country, is that, you know, what's fascinating about Burnham, and this is perhaps something that I think will be welcomed, maybe not by people in your part of the world, but in people nearer my part of the world, is that he's actually from a different part of the country, right? And he himself has talked for a long time, and including during the by-election in Makerfield, about doing something for those areas that feel neglected. And that will be an interesting thing to see as well.
Yeah, absolutely. But one of the things that he did achieve in Manchester, which seems to go down very, very well, is the idea of buying British, right? So he's made it a policy in Manchester with contracts and things like that they would be British bought. The problem with that, if he goes with that with defence, for example, is that things built in Britain tend to be more expensive. So there's going to have to be a quid pro quo, isn't there? If people want British-made drones or British-made planes or British-made defence, then we are going to have to pay more for that. Do you think the country would accept that?
Well, look, I think they would. You know, if you're talking about a situation where, you know, young people have not got apprenticeships and young people have not got jobs, and you're putting people into jobs in these areas, if you're talking about, you know, seeing physically factories being built, seeing, you know, new innovations in that particular industry, you know, Britain's got a great tradition, right, of all of that. You know, I don't have to travel far in Edinburgh to see, you know, a couple of, you know, very, very famous defence manufacturers. You know, if there's an expansion in these, if people can see that there's extra work, for example, and again, I can only talk about local experience in Glasgow and on the Clyde for building defence ships and frigates, then, you know, these are things, and you could be right that they might be more expensive to build here than they would be to build overseas. But look, people will be more than happy to see these kind of developments. Rosyth is pretty near here. There's a lot of talk about, you know, Britain expanding its shipbuilding capability, defence shipbuilding capability. And at the moment, we seem to be building lots of ships for orders for Scandinavia and for other places. You know, if there is more orders for, you know, that domestic capability, and look, it's necessary, isn't it? We're worried about, you know, the Russians. We're worried about what's happening in the North Sea. We're worried about defending, you know, critical cable networks and the like. You know, we saw only last week commandos stopping a Russian boat in the Channel, or a Russian a boat, sorry, with oil from Russia in the Channel. You know, people can see that there's a link between all these things. And if Burnham can, as I say, you know, provide physical evidence that these things are happening, then I think that's something that will be supported. Look, there's also a big political benefit from all of this. You know, one of the critical reasons that people in the Labour Party have really got rid of Starmer at this time and look as if they're going to have no contest in the leadership of Andy Burnham is that against the odds in Makerfield he defeated Reform. All of these people in the House of Commons, that massive Labour majority, are looking over their shoulders, particularly at Reform, and working out how they can defeat Reform. And, you know, they've now got a ready-made example in the form of Andy Burnham as a guy who did that last week. And this is the thing that will galvanise their support for him going forward. But look, he's only got a short time. You were talking about the budget in October. I was actually calculating earlier from July the 15th that 100 days, I think, takes us to the 23rd of October.
Yeah.
And it's over. He's only got a short time to develop this plan and get out there and start selling it. But he's a communicator. He's got a personality. And that's the difference between him and Starmer.
Yeah, I mean, the things that Starmer could do between now and then, though, could make it more difficult for Andy Burnham.
I think he's already made it more difficult with such a short timetable.
Yeah.
I think Andy Burnham would rather have seen something much closer to the Labour Party conference. I'm not saying September. That seems like a long way away. But, you know, sometime, I mean, we're at June the 22nd and, you know, we're expecting that Burnham will take over on the 15th of July.
Yeah, it's less than a month.
It's not a long time. So that's the kind of barb in the tail that Keir Starmer's left for Andy Burnham, I think.
Well, we'll wait and see who's currying favour with him. Angela Rayner will be back with a big job, presumably. There's other people who will be sidling up to Andy Burnham as we speak in the bar, trying to sort out a job. John, always such a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed for joining me on this very important day. John Boothman there, political correspondent at the Sunday Times in Scotland. And John's doing the papers with me, I think, on Wednesday. Always worth a listen. Quick break. Back in a sec.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there, this is Talk, and it's Petrie here with you. And coming up at midnight, it's your chance to talk back. And I really just want to have a look and see this country in the last 10 years. This will be our 7th Prime Minister. And as I was saying earlier, while I completely support the way that our politics is run in this country in the terms of being able to get rid of somebody midway through a term, like I said, there's plenty of people in America who are kind of going, oh, you can do that, can you? You can get rid of somebody halfway through. Yes, we can, but we're doing it a lot. And it's you know, to lose one Prime Minister, to lose 7 or 6 is Do you know what I mean? It's more than an accident, really. So I wonder if we are ungovernable, whether we are too demanding, whether we want something done yesterday. I mean, we are of that. I mean, if I'm ordering something and I see that it won't be delivered for 3 days, I can't wait that long. I don't even need it right now. So I want something that's going to be delivered tomorrow. So I'm as guilty of that as the next person. And I think with politics, we expect it to happen straight away. And we will be demanding that of Andy Burnham, make no mistake. If he comes in and sort of doesn't have a plan and doesn't hit the ground running and doesn't come up with something big by the October budget, if he doesn't make some significant changes, if he doesn't communicate well enough with us, it's going to be right next. Who's next then? I mean, will Andy Burnham see it through to the general election, which is 3 years' time? And if you think there's going to be an early general election, I just don't think it's going to happen. You know, the Turkeys don't vote for Christmas. Politicians don't ask for an early election when they know they're on the back foot. And Labour is on the back foot at the moment. The Tories don't want a general election either. The only party that does, who thinks they would benefit from an early election, is Reform. And they probably would benefit from an early election. So, no, I don't think Andy Burnham, despite him calling for one when Rishi Sunak took over with the Tories, I don't think he's going to... They never do, right? It's just all hypocrisy. But I want to know from you, are we ungovernable? Are we... What is going... Have we got the politics kind of that we deserve? Because there's something going on here when we've had 7 prime ministers in 10 years. I mean, that is absolutely terrible. I mean, a lot of them were absolutely terrible, and quite rightly we should have got rid of them, and absolutely right we did get rid of them. But it's now kind of looking like it might be not just their fault. Are we too demanding? Give me a call, 0344 499 1000. Those calls are charged at the national rate, but we do call you back. And you can text the word talk and your message to 87222.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there. Just a reminder that coming up at midnight is Andrew Hosken, and he's going to be going through the papers. No surprise at all as to what's on all of the front pages of the newspapers, which is why we've got Andrew in, because he has got the most fantastic knowledge of politics and can talk us through all the stuff. So Andrew's going to be in at 11 o'clock, at the top of the hour, to go through the papers. Now, though, oh, and Vicky Price is coming up as well in about 20 minutes. Absolutely thrilled to get her. We're going to be talking about the impact of this on the economy. But before that, I wanted to examine what an Andy Burnham premiership would look like on the world stage. Andy Burnham has already declared that he wants to spend a lot of his time in the UK, fixing UK problems. But the issue is that geopolitics, dear boy, is everywhere. And we are in a complete pickle geopolitically. You've got the ever-changing relationships between the US and Europe. You've got NATO is an issue because, again, of the US. We've got Ukraine Ukraine. Zelensky must be very worried right now as to whether he will get the same sort of support from Andy Burnham as he undoubtedly received from Keir Starmer. Keir Starmer was well regarded on the global stage. In fact, Andy Burnham should really make Keir Starmer Foreign Secretary and leave Keir Starmer to go and do what he does best, push him out into the world to take care of foreign affairs while he concentrates at home. You heard it here first. I think that is a great plan. Actually, it was my producer who suggested that earlier. But it would be an excellent thing to do, because how will Andy Burnham be received on the global stage, given we are in the Iran war, the Strait of Hormuz? UK promised to help demine the Strait of Hormuz once the peace has been secured. All of these things that are going on, a massive economic crisis created by the Strait of Hormuz. So how does changing Prime Minister help with any of that? I would argue that it doesn't. Well, joining me to discuss this with me now is Scott Lucas, as we know very well, a professor of international politics and founder and editor of EA Worldview. Scott, you my first name when we were discussing this morning, so thank you. I'm so grateful for you agreeing to do this. First of all, how does this look on the world stage? 7 prime ministers now in 10 years.
I think there's a paradox here. I think, as you quite rightly mentioned, in some respects, Britain has been more than pulling its weight on the world stage under the Starmer government. As you rightly noted, Britain has a very important place in terms of the ongoing support for Ukraine against the Russian invasion. Starmer, I think it'd be difficult for anybody to navigate Donald Trump, but I think he navigated him quite well at important points. Think back to that critical moment when Trump was going to cut Ukraine loose entirely, and Starmer pulled him back in by offering the state visit from King Charles. I think while Starmer handcuffed himself, and I'm just going to say personally, I think unwisely, by ruling out going back into the single market, I think European leaders saw Starmer as someone who genuinely wanted to rebuild the relationship with Europe, while in effect be limited in what he could do. I think he's done as much as he can in terms of the current Middle East crisis, because to be honest with you, I don't think Europe and the UK are at the center in terms of what's happening there. I could give you that whole list there, but I think the paradox is that domestically, and it's not as much Starmer, but it's as much as Britain is seen as having caused this huge self-inflicted wound 10 years ago, as we come up to the anniversary. And I know a lot of people who watch your station aren't going to like that, but the fact remains that that was an act of isolation to some respects. You may support it, but you were cutting yourself off from Europe, and you really weren't going into a replacement. And I think the way that you've looked at it, and what has struck me about this, because I listened to that very good summary you gave a few minutes ago, is that each of the UK prime ministers has been brought down by the legacy of Brexit. That's the interesting thing. I mean, David Cameron, quite obviously, because of the referendum. Theresa May, because there were others who objected to the way she was conducting the negotiations, especially Boris Johnson, who was supported by the Trump people to come into power. Then Johnson falls in large part because of COVID, although Brexit plays a part. Rishi Sunak, how could I forget Liz Truss? How could I forget Liz? How could I forget those magical 42 days or whatever it was, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think we know that, the risk of economic implosion there. I'm sorry, I'm looking at Lord Buckethead going, this may be the appropriate analogy for what we're talking about. And then you get to Rishi Sunak, who can't right the ship either. And then it's Labour's turn to inherit the economic issues, to be honest with you. And I think it's really interesting, Petrie. I do a lot of work with Polish television, a very good outlet called TVP World. And it's really interesting. I've talked to their folks. I've gotten to know them quite well. And they talked about how, you remember 25 years ago, we in the UK looked upon Poland as being that place out in Europe that, they had to send us all their people to make a bit of money and to send back. Poland now has about 86% of the GDP that Britain has. It's not quite as close on a per capita basis.
But it's doing brilliantly.
It's doing really, really well.
Yeah.
Since it joined the EU. And I think you could say that for several other countries that have joined the EU. And I think, again, I'm trying not to beat people over the head, but I think there's another analogy when you look at prime ministers and you look at it. Remember how we used to talk about Italy would have the rotating door on prime ministers, and they did.
They did.
Well, Giorgia Meloni's been there for a few years now, right? And the thing about Giorgia Meloni is, although she's very, very right wing, especially on issues like immigration, she made that decision not to pull Italy out of Europe, out of the EU, precisely because Italy had too much to lose economically by coming out. And that has given the Italians a measure of political stability that we wouldn't have even thought they had about 15 years ago.
Yeah, I don't think it's any coincidence that it's the 10-year anniversary of Brexit, and we've had 7 prime ministers in those 10 years because of the economic hit. So with the economic hit, what is it, 100 billion a year or something down from GDP, that the prime ministers have failed to meet our expectations. Certainly because there hasn't been the money, and that's what pushes taxes up, and that's what makes us all feel pretty miserable. But Andy Burnham, he is going to have to be on the world stage, isn't he? As much as he says he doesn't want to be, he's going to have to step into Keir Starmer's shoes, which I think, as much as he's failed here, he has succeeded overseas.
Well, you put it that way, and there's sort of an upside and a downside here. The upside here is that I think there will be a honeymoon period for Burnham, and that world leaders will realize he's got a task on his hands, right? Now, paradoxically, having come out of Europe, Burnham's a little bit shielded on the Ukraine issue because, of course, that is a European issue. And there are other European leaders that I think you'll see Emmanuel Macron continue to be at the fore, Friedrich Merz, Meloni will still be there, and so on. I think he's kind of sheltered on the Iran / Israel / Middle East issue, again, because it's the Gulf states that I think are on the forefront of that, even a country like Pakistan with the mediator's role. So you've got the Europeans that are there. Tariffs have kind of, they're still in a nuisance, but we've kind of gotten used to them, the 15% tariff from the States. If Trump doesn't kick up a fuss there, then I think he's got some time. And also, despite, Trump's rather nasty farewell message to Keir Starmer, I don't see him coming in and putting the boot in on Burnham immediately.
Do you not think he's going to test that, though? He is going to test Burnham straight away and push him and try to prove that he's the big dog. He's the boss. He said that at G7.
Except for a couple things. One is Trump has got an awful lot on his hands now, especially for someone who, as someone talked about the other day, like a reactionary butterfly jumping from issue to issue. And the fact here is he's got Iran, which is an absolute mess right now for the Americans. He's got a lot of domestic problems building up in the United States. His approval ratings are sinking. I think some of Trump's folks have the UK in their targets. But I think the second issue here is the Trump folks have been actively working with reform to get Starmer out. And I'm happy to talk to you all about that at some point, because it's there. This started back in January 25 when Trump came into office. Elon Musk called for Starmer to be put in prison. Well, they got their man in a way, right? And I don't think necessarily they're going to go for Burnham the same way they went for Starmer immediately, because reform's got its own issues right now. And that is that by-election last week, that Makerfield by-election, as much as it was the final blow to Starmer, it's a big blow to reform as well.
Yeah, they thought they were going to walk that.
They thought they were going to walk it. And now their problem here is that, okay, you can gun for Burnham, which they already will, but they're being outflanked on the hard right by Restore. And that scrap between Rupert Lowe and Nigel Farage is going to take up a bit of bandwidth. So I'm not saying Burnham's going to get a free pass if he comes in. I think you've talked about the acceleration of the news cycle where prime ministers come under a greater scrutiny. But I think he's got a bit of a period of time. But having said all that, I think if you talk about the global stage, it's going to be really important who his foreign minister and his defense minister are. One thing that really rocked Starmer in the final days was John Healey's resignation, because he was really well liked on the international stage. And people saw Healey's resignation not as politics, not as trying to get one up on Starmer. They saw it as a departure on almost a point of principle.
On principle.
And that is...
Well, maybe, I mean, if Andy Burnham comes up with the money, maybe John Healey will take that job back.
But then we go full circle, because what no one would fully say is the reason why you don't have the money for defense is because you don't have the money with government revenues haven't taken the hit that they've taken in recent years. There's a smaller pie, which is there for everything that we're trying to divide it up into.
Yeah. Absolutely right. Scott, it's always such a pleasure. Thank you very much indeed for joining me. Scott Lucas there, Professor of International Politics and founder and editor of EA World View. Stay where you are and we'll have a look at the economic impact of having yet another Prime Minister.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there, this is Talk and it is Petrie here with you until 1 o'clock. And of course, coming up at midnight, I do want to hear from you as to why you think we've had so many Prime Ministers in just a decade. Scott Lucas there, tracing it back to Brexit. And the uncomfortable truth is that the economy has suffered as a result of Brexit. Well, we know that, right? We appreciate that is the truth. And that has had a knock-on effect, I think, for all of the Prime Ministers we've had since then. And that has had an impact on spending power, on taxation, because that's the only other way to get any money, isn't it, is to tax us to the moon and back. In fact, that's what Rachel Reeves was planning to do this October. That she said we're going to have to go for more taxes. So I wonder if that is how you see it, or not. I mean, how do you see it? Is it because we're too impatient? Is it because we want to see stuff now? What do you think is the reason that we've had so many Prime Ministers? And like I said, I will always support our democracy in terms of being able to get rid of people halfway through a term if we don't think that they're up to scratch, right? There are plenty of countries who would love to do the same thing who can't. So I absolutely support that ability that as a country we have to show our discontent. But it does have impacts. This switching prime ministers sort of every year and a half or so, or less than that, it does have an impact, and it has an impact on our relationships abroad. It has an impact on how we're seen abroad. It has an impact on our foreign affairs, and it has an impact on our economy. And financial markets stayed calm, actually, after Keir Starmer resigned, because investors had already expected the news. The pound dropped briefly but soon recovered, and the FTSE 100 stock market rose slightly. Government bonds remained steady, showing that investors are not panicking, but definitely people will not be piling in to government debt eagerly at the moment. Business leaders do worry that political arguments might delay important decisions. Well, the UK economy still faces long-term challenges as tight government budgets make it difficult to create quick economic growth. So how will the markets view Andy Burnham? We don't really know where he stands, because he said one thing and he's already sort of changed his mind on that. But here to discuss this, I'm thrilled to say, is the wonderful Vicky Price, Chief Economic Advisor, Centre for Economics and British Business Research. Vicky, thank you very much indeed for joining me. I mean, 7 Prime Ministers in 10 years. How does this make us look?
Well, everyone is saying that it makes us look Italian, although, of course, Italy has now become a very stable
Much more stable
country.
Yeah.
Yes. So, I mean, we didn't used to have that, but of course, the reason why other countries had those changes happening more frequently is because they have generally tended to have coalitions. So the way in which their system, the parliamentary voting system works is, of course, not in terms of first past the post the way we do it, but to proportional representation, which ends up with loads and loads of different parties. And therefore, you have this instability of coalitions, and then the coalition may change its mind and decide, or one of the partners may decide to walk out. So that's basically what was happening. Now, of course, we are moving not just to losing quite a lot of prime ministers very frequently without even having that type of system, but we've also moved to having the type of multi-party system suddenly, which has emerged despite our weird system of voting MPs in. So we probably are now much more unstable, even if we don't change the way in which we vote, than was the case before. And I think that is also reflected now in losing prime ministers, because other new parties, such as Reform here, for example, become more of a threat. And the party that is in power feels threatened and want more. They want perhaps a better prime minister, or somebody perhaps will reassure them that their jobs will still be there next time and they're not going to be swept away by some newcomers who may have different ideas of what they want to do. So I'm afraid, yes, we are in a period where, well, perhaps we're not in a period where maybe we have now entered a new stable situation where actually we do lose prime ministers quite frequently.
It's just an interesting one, isn't it? That it does all come back to the economy and the country not fulfilling promises as quickly as we would like to see them fulfilled. I mean, Keir Starmer as well in his presidency, he wasn't very good at communicating either. So we never really knew when something good had happened because he never told us, and we never knew what he really stood for. With Andy Burnham, and it does look like it'll be a coronation, even though there's some talk of one person challenging. Do we know what Andy Burnham stands for? Because I'm not sure we do. We thought we did, but he's sort of come back and gone back on a few of the things that he said are principles of his.
I think he's going to have to respect the manifesto in its general terms, although a lot of the things that Keir Starmer and also Rachel Reeves were trying to...
They weren't in the manifesto.
They weren't in the manifesto.
Yeah, quite.
Exactly. So, you know, you've got to listen to what I said with a pinch of salt. So whether indeed he's going to stick to those. But I think he does know that what the voters wanted was growth and perhaps the sort of wealth of the country spread more equally. And we've seen a certain element of that, but not enough, particularly not in the regions. And the problem is that what's going on right now, I mean, Andy Burnham that we're seeing here, of course, has been representing sort of bits of the north quite effectively in the last few years. But there is no doubt that devolution hasn't gone far enough in the minds of loads of people, including loads of politicians. Their own constituents in the various parts of the country would like a little bit more autonomy and the ability to do things their own way. They distrust London, which they think holds a lot of power. And it's absolutely true that it's London and the southeast that basically fund the rest of the country.
Yeah.
They like to see that reversed. But unfortunately, because of tariffs, because of Brexit, because of everything, it's really, yes, okay, Manchester has done well in the last few years, but it's really the areas with a lot of manufacturing that have suffered quite significantly in the last few years. And the cost of levelling up has gone up, unfortunately, as a result. And it's going to be a difficult area for Andy Burnham.
But can we bring that back, that manufacturing, Vicky? Because I was talking earlier about, you know, Andy Burnham has made a big deal of procurement in Manchester and in the Northern Bloc of buying British. And if with the defence budget, for example, if he said, right, that is going to be our philosophy, the issue with that is it could be a bit more expensive, you know, to gear up to that level of manufacturing again in this country. You've got to start really from scratch again. But how would that be seen by the markets? How would that be seen economically as a decision that probably would cost us a bit more, but it would bring those jobs back, it would bring back manufacturing?
I think supporting your own manufacturing sector is a good idea, as long as it's not done at the expense of being able to also profit from what goes on elsewhere. And I think one of the benefits of trade is that you tend to go and bring the things into your production process from where they're not necessarily just cheaper, but also where they're done better, more productive. Of course, if we can become more productive in some of our areas of manufacturing, there is a lot of advanced manufacturing where we're really quite good, life sciences where we're really strong, defense that you mentioned, where indeed we are strong. But the real beauty of working with others, such as Europe, possibly on the defense side, is that our own procurement, which is done in conjunction with others, will be much more beneficial to our country than if we did it by ourselves. Because as you rightly say, there is a limit to what we can do in terms of even encouraging or spending money on supporting our own industry, when in fact, given that the market is so much bigger elsewhere, we can benefit from that bigger market making demands on us a lot more than if we did it just in a sort of nationalistic, sovereign way. And that, I think, was the mistake of Brexit, to think that that's what was going to happen. It is particularly worrying right now, I'm afraid, because, of course, the EU is going for buy EU. We may say, buy more British stuff, assuming, of course, that it's owned by the Brits, whereas, of course, most of them are not. With this large foreign direct investment that we've had, lots of firms are in fact foreign owned, and a lot of the profits go elsewhere at the end of the day. But nevertheless, the EU is now becoming more closed itself, and wants to have the procedures which are set up, which prove what the content of a particular bit of production is. They're doing it supposedly to shield themselves from Chinese competition, and possibly also in terms of what's going on with the US, but they will be much more careful where inputs come from, and the UK may well suffer as a result. So this is really why there is a serious incentive to work more closely with the EU, whatever you may think about Brexit itself. If you're looking at the economy, which I think is what you mentioned is the reason why we lost all those prime ministers, then we need to do something about the economy if we want to avoid losing many more, even more frequently in the future.
The economists such as yourself and the markets will be looking very closely, won't they, to see who Andy Burnham places in his cabinet, notably as Chancellor of the Exchequer. And I know that there's a real sharp intake of breath across the markets if Ed Miliband's name is mentioned as a potential Chancellor. So that who he chooses to be around him will impact what the markets do, won't it?
Well, yes, and I think the markets, you mentioned earlier that they were pretty sort of passive today. I think they are probably leaning towards thinking that it would be West Streeting.
Yeah, that's what I think.
And the reason why they would worry if it's anyone else is that in case that anyone else proves to be a little bit more left-leaning than perhaps what we've seen so far.
So borrow and spend, basically.
Yes, yes. Although, frankly, borrow and spend is what we may need to do to increase defence spending.
Yeah.
Having said that, there is no doubt that there's going to be a big look at welfare and how one can do something on this rising cost that we've got now. And as we know, when it was tried before, it didn't go very far because quite a large part of the Labour Party, or at least the MPs, didn't really like it, and that's why it didn't happen. It's entirely possible that Andy Burnham may be able to get the party behind him or get the MPs behind him and do something about welfare, which absolutely needs to be done. And we're going to have, of course, the Tim's report coming out, report, which originally wasn't going to say anything about sort of reducing the spending on welfare, but I don't see how it can possibly not.
There's no point in it if they don't, right?
Otherwise, I think there are going to be more taxes, and those taxes are going to be quite painful for business and for individuals, even though when you look at sort of the working person, and compare what they pay in terms of tax with other countries in Europe, we're not actually being taxed particularly heavily.
Can you say that a little bit less loud? I don't want anybody hearing that.
On average, we're not. For the middle earners, they're doing reasonably well by comparison to others. But yes, it's getting less so because of course we had the extension of the threshold from when you start paying tax, which is now sort of
I think there's a paradox
affecting
here.
many more millions.
Dragging more people in.
So it is getting a little bit worse than it was before, but still, on average, we have been not taxing the middle earners that much, but that is gradually being eroded.
Yeah, and also there looks like there might be more wealth taxes on the way from Andy Burnham. Vicky, I could talk to you all night. I really could. Thank you so much for joining me. It's always a pleasure. Vicky Price there, Chief Economic Advisor and Centre for Economics and Business Research. She really is. She's the GOAT, I think. And I'm not calling her a GOAT, you know what I mean. Greatest of all time. Anyway, that is it for this hour. But coming up the other side of the news, Petrie Hosken will be here to take us through the papers. And the papers, you'll not be surprised to learn, pretty much the same front page. But we will make it interesting, so don't go anywhere.
The question my party is asking now is whether I am best placed to lead us into the next general election. I have heard the answer of my parliamentary party to that question, and I accept that answer with good grace. Every decision I've taken has been about putting the country I love first. That is why I will resign as leader of the Labour Party.
Well, you know what? In the end, he did do the right thing, and there were some achievements, and he's an honourable man, and he cared about public service. Guys, that's not what happened just now. In the last half an hour, Keir Starmer resigned, and he resigned because he was pushed. Most of his issues, most of the things which have damned him from, let's face it, within days, within weeks of him becoming Prime Minister back in July 2024, or of his own making. They were things he chose to do, cutting the winter fuel allowance, damning everybody who wanted to have a public inquiry on the grooming gangs as jumping onto the far-right bandwagon, the two-tier policing after the Southport riots. This man brought it on himself. He was not a good Prime Minister.
There was two things on that manifesto. One was a picture of Keir Starmer and the word change. Well, promise made and promise delivered in that sense. Let's be honest. But look, I mean, I don't really want to make light of it, but I am cheesed off, Julia, because what we promised in opposition was competence, and it's been anything but. I'm embarrassed. I'm really, truly, honestly, I am embarrassed, because I did think we would be competent. We've not been.
I've no idea whether there'll be a contest or a coronation. But what I do know is the British public have simply had enough of political parties chopping and changing their leaders at will. We vote for somebody in a general election to be our Prime Minister. We expect them
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello and a very good evening to you. It is Petrie here with you through until 1 o'clock. And as always, it's your chance to talk back at midnight. So I want to hear from you about what's going on in this country, right? So basically, we'll have had 7 prime ministers by July or September in 10 years, right? I want to know whether you think that makes us ungovernable. Are we ungovernable in this country? What is going on? I think we get the politics that we ask for. and the politics we deserve. Now, as I keep saying, I do support the way that we can get rid of a leader whenever we want to, really, right? I do support that. I think there are a lot of countries who wish that they had the same ability to get rid of a leader that is failing the same way that we can. However, 7 in 10 years is really pushing it, isn't it? So do we demand too much too quickly? Are we that sort of country now where we expect everything to change immediately? And Andy Burnham's got it cut out for him, because he's coming in, he will come in, it'll probably be a coronation. There is some talk about one person mounting a challenge, but I reckon that, like Wes Streeting, he could probably be bought off with a decent job. You know, it looks like it'll be a coronation. Andy Burnham could be our Prime Minister by July 15th, middle of July, and we'll be expecting him to make a difference, right? Because that's why we got rid of Keir Starmer, because he didn't make a difference quickly enough. He didn't communicate well enough. He didn't tell us what he was about. He brought things in that weren't even in the manifesto, like digital ID, which I'll never forgive him for. So there are other things that we expect, but we are very, I think rightly demanding, right? We pay these people, that's their job. But do we expect too much too quickly? Are we now impatient? The news flow is so much quicker. Everything is so much quicker. You've got all the social media as well telling us how dreadful things are all the time. And so we expect and demand change. But do we demand it too quickly? What if Andy Burnham doesn't deliver quickly enough? I mean, he's literally got until October, I think, to prove his mettle, because that's when the budget is. Likely to be a Wes Streeting Chancellor, unlikely to be Rachel Reeves, not only because of her close relationship with Keir Starmer, but also because she's universally not respected, put it that way, in this country. So have we got the politics that we deserve? Are we too demanding? Are we not demanding enough? What do you think is going on that we've had so many prime ministers? Look, some of them were absolutely pants, weren't they? And they should have gone. They shouldn't have even been there in the first place. And maybe that we just have low-calibre politicians that are just not up to the job. But is Andy Burnham this great messiah? Is he going to be the answer to all of our problems? Or should there be an early election? Now, Andy Burnham called for one when Rishi Sunak took over, but I bet you pound to a penny, there's no way Labour are going to call an early election. There's absolutely no way. So Reform can tweet on in the sidelines saying that they demand an early election. The Tories don't want one either, because they know they're on the back foot, and Labour is not going to call an early election. But do you think perhaps there should be? And when the Prime Minister changes, because we don't vote for the person as much as personality politics is a thing in this country, we vote for the party, which is why when you saw Keir Starmer resign today, he resigned as leader of the Labour Party, right? Which in turn sees him lose as Prime Minister. But he didn't resign as Prime Minister, he resigned as leader of the Labour Party, because we voted in the Labour Party. So do we think that every time there is a change, there should be a general election? Crikey, can you imagine that? There'd have been 7 general elections in the last 10 years. We can barely be bothered to go and vote every 5 years, let alone every year and a couple of months. Come on. Anyway, I'd love to hear from you on this. Are we getting the politics that we deserve? The uncertainty that this creates, not just financially, but also on the global stage as well. It is a bit, it does cost us a lot, these changes in prime ministers, but maybe you think this is the best thing that ever happened, and that it's a good thing that Keir Starmer has gone. I don't doubt that. I wonder about the timing of it, I think, with what's going on geopolitically, but it's pretty ropey for Andy Burnham to fit into, unless they make Keir Starmer Foreign Secretary. It's a good call. Anyway, look, give me a call on this. I'd like to know your views on this. This is your country. And Andy Burnham is likely to be your Prime Minister. So what do you make of that? Do give me a call. 0344 499 1000. Calls are charged at national rate, but we do call you back. And text the word talk and your message to 87222. We're here to discuss this and to go through the hugely predictable front pages of the newspapers is Andrew Hosken, who is an author and journalist and former BBC senior correspondent. Good to see you, Andrew. Thank you for joining me.
Good to join us on such a momentous day.
On a huge day, yeah.
Yes.
I mean, seriously. So, 7 prime ministers in 10 years. Are we ungovernable?
Well, yeah, you have to think that, goodness me, if you had to go back 7 prime ministers, so what we're saying is since David Cameron had to resign over the Brexit referendum, of which the 10th anniversary is tomorrow.
Tomorrow, yep.
So we will have had 7 prime ministers if Andy Burnham manages to, get his coronation.
Oh, somebody will.
It'll be, yes, absolutely. If you think, well, if you go back 7 prime ministers, you go back to 1970 when Edward Heath was the Prime Minister. And in fact, you could argue that if you took the total number of people who were Prime Minister, then Harold Wilson, of course, preceded Edward Heath in 1970. So you go back as far as 1964. so that is an indication of just how unstable our politics have become in the last 10 years. And, I think the Brexit referendum has had a lot to do with it. Not only,
It seems coincidental, doesn't it, that we were stable, we had as many prime ministers from 64 to the Brexit referendum as we've had... 70. To the referendum as we've had since.
Yes.
So, I mean... I don't like coincidence in that regard. It feels a little bit like it's probably related.
It's not only a coincidence, I think, because it obviously... it's weakened the economy, but it's also exposed aspects of our politics and our economy as well. So it's sort of compounded the problems we had. It's erected trade barriers. It's completely shattered relationships that we've had with countries on the European Union. So it's had all these other impacts. I mean, Mark Carney, when he was the Governor of the Bank of England, talked around about the time of the Brexit referendum about the UK relying on the kindness of strangers. And a lot of that was about our soft power, about the fact that people liked us. Well, of course, when we decided to break off our relationship with the European Union, a lot of that went into the bin, and a lot of people saw us differently and didn't think we were as stable as they'd hitherto thought we were, sort of practical, sensible Brits. So, but in terms of the politics, the inability of successive governments to be able to implement Brexit, whatever that is, the departure from the European Union, under which sort of not only our economic but also our, our sort of continental and security relationship is sort of based in a way. I mean, it's more than trade, it's also about security. A lot of that was totally destabilised Conservative and Labour Party, of course, of which had based their entire manifestos and policies on being in the European Union. And
with the money that brought.
With the money that it brought and the relationships it brought and the sort of economic model that it brought, the trade relationships that it brought, that they were taken for granted, and all the other relationships that we had, through freedom of movement and all these massive, intricate relationships that we had with the European Union. And there was an inability to...
But people were told, though, that because we weren't paying them as much as we had been paying them, that all of that, well, 350 million a week going into the NHS was one of the lies that was proved to be a lie on the side of buses. So, people were lied to. I mean, that's been proven, right? So, it's... I think what you can say, can't you, is that the promises that were made by the people who sold, haven't come into being, and there's a number of reasons for that. I mean, first of all, no one really had an idea of what Brexit looked like. Yeah.
I mean, there's so many different variations, 57 varieties, like with Heinz baked beans, of what Brexit could be, and nobody seemed terribly, desirous to sort of express exactly what that was, or to sort of pin their flag to any one version of it. And of course, we ended up with what some people think was quite a botched version of it.
Which has hampered economically every Prime Minister since, and therefore they've not been able to deliver on their promises, and that's why we get rid of them so quickly.
It's had that. I think it's had lots of different aspects of it, not just economic. I think also that the people who expected their lives to be made better. I mean, there were politicians who said, if you do this, your life will be so much better. Your clothes will be cheaper. Your kids, Gran will be able to get an appointment with a GP. Your clothes will be cheaper. Your food will be cheaper. This, that, that, everything will be brilliant, and it wasn't. It's ironic in a way that the people who sold that have been the ones who've been most benefiting from it politically, or appear to be in recent years. But that's a separate thing. But in terms of the sort of mainstream political parties dealing with it and trying to implement something they didn't believe in or didn't believe was good for the country, I think has been one of the factors that's destabilised our politics. I mean, Vicky Price, your previous guest, was talking about Italy, and of course, Italy was quite unstable very unstable in the 1970s, and particularly the 1980s. But as she said, a lot of that was to do with a coalition government. You had you had political violence. You had political parties. You had the communists who were very prominent. But you had these parties which goodness me, it was so bad. And one of the Prime Minister Aldo Moro was murdered by far-left extremist terrorists. So it was a very unstable country. I mean, we've been changing prime ministers in governments that weren't coalition governments, but which had stonking majorities.
Yeah.
I mean, Theresa May had a majority, threw it away in the election that she called in 2017. It was toppled by Boris Johnson. Boris Johnson was toppled when he had a majority of 70 plus. He broke the Red Wall, didn't he? Yeah, and then we've got a Prime Minister being forced out despite having a majority of 174. So in terms of the stability, you can't blame the sort of political structures for it. It's a kind of an internal thing of politics that hasn't been able to handle the new environments that have been created partly through Brexit, part also COVID, the instability now of our international relationships with America. Who would have thought that, we'd have someone like Donald Trump in the White House and the impact that's had on our security and all the rest of it. I mean, don't forget, in 2016, the Brexiteers were saying, if we leave the European Union, we'll have fantastic trade deals with China, India, and most importantly, United States. Well, of course, the economists...
We were hampered by Biden, weren't we, who didn't want to have a good trade deal with us.
Well, yes, I mean, the Americans, they don't do trade deals with other people, as we see. I mean, they just don't do it. I mean, we already had as much of a good trading relationship with America as you could. And the economists at the Bank of England said, even if we had the most fantastic trade deal you could possibly think with America, it didn't come anywhere near replacing the European Union thing. But of course, that was experts, and what do they know? So that was it. So I think that there has been, and there's been other factors making our politics unstable, the media, the social media. I mean, I have never...
But we are also... We want everything quickly. Everything has got to be done quickly. Nobody waits for anything. If you've got to wait for a taxi for more than 2 minutes, it's like, if you've got to wait for a parcel to be delivered more than a day, it's like, what's the point of this?
Yes.
We have become those people who demand change quickly. And if Andy Burnham doesn't, hit the ground running, like I said, he's got until October, really, when the budget happens, to do something. He doesn't have to do everything, but he has to make some significant change, because he hasn't got long. Because we don't give them long.
Well, no, I mean, hopefully we'll give him beyond October.
But he's got to show something by then.
Well, he's got to give a very good reason as to why he's helped topple Keir Starmer, who won the election. I mean, he wasn't even an MP.
No.
So he didn't win a 174-seat majority. Andy Burnham, he was up in Manchester making sure the buses ran on time. He wasn't running the country, and he wasn't an MP at the time. So he's going to have to come up with a very good reason why he has been an instigator, I think, partly, of all this turmoil and chaos.
I agree with you.
I think his political ambition, I mean, let's not beat around the bush. I mean, of course his political ambition has been a factor in all this. He wants to become Prime Minister, along with the 402 other members of Parliament who are Labour members of Parliament.
want to be Prime Minister.
Everyone wants to be Prime Minister, right?
Yeah.
That's partly why people become MPs. So he wanted to become Prime Minister. He had 2 previous shots at it.
And failed.
In 2010 and 2015, and didn't get it. And then became sort of the mayor of the metropolitan area of Manchester, and has done a pretty good job. So he tells everybody.
Yeah.
As seems to be the consensus.
Not in every
but he's
market.
going to have to explain what he can offer that's different from Keir Starmer. And
Well, he's a better
why
communicator to start with.
Well, I think that's a really good point, and I think it's funny, isn't it? I was thinking about this today, that the successful, the people that, for some reason, I mean, people. There's this common conception that people hate politicians. Oh, they're all, you can't trust what they say. And actually, when you look at the career trajectories of, someone like Keir Starmer and Andy Burnham, ever since he was a student ever since he's only been a politician. He hasn't been anything else.
He's only ever been a politician.
He's been, he was a, MP's researcher, and then he becomes an MP. And actually, of course, there's a side of politics which it is a profession. I mean, it's just a fact. It is. Winston Churchill was a professional politician. I mean, we have this romantic view of Winston Churchill, but he was a professional politician. Keir Starmer wasn't a professional politician. Yeah. He was a lawyer, and then he became a very senior civil servant, running becoming director of public prosecutions, and he became a member of Parliament in his 50s.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, he's gone from being a member of Parliament, elected in 2015, to being Prime Minister and outed in 11 years.
It's extraordinary.
Which is nuts.
Yeah. It's nuts,
frankly.
but a lot of people do blame his fall on the fact that he didn't get into politics until much later, because he didn't have the groundwork, he didn't have the foundation, if you like, which Andy Burnham will have. He's got mates around every corner, he's got supporters, he's got people who back him up. Whereas Keir Starmer looked like a very lonely man.
Well, it's funny, isn't it? If you look at people talk about, we just want a bloke who's going to come in and run it, or a woman who's going to come in and run everything.
No, you want somebody who can.
But the evidence is that people tend to go towards professional politicians who behave and talk like professional politicians, and I describe them almost as salesman politicians. So, for example, people voted for Tony Blair. He was a great salesman for what he did.
Yeah.
They didn't. Gordon Brown, not so much. He wasn't. The same thing with Theresa May. I mean, she couldn't. Her opponents thought she couldn't sell a sausage politically.
Her personality were in her shoes, weren't they?
But Boris Johnson, for all his many, many faults, nevertheless, people liked him because he could sell, what they wanted. Now, bucking the trend, of course, was Keir Starmer in 2024, but it seems to have reverted to type now. He's up against, and he's been defeated, I think, and we were replaced by a better political salesman. And I think the political salesmanship, of politics, which people get through being in politics for a long time, understanding the communication skills you have to sell policies.
Yeah, I mean, that was for me, that was Starmer's biggest.
And so he's been sort of bullied out of his job because he didn't have the charisma and the political and communication skills, which these days, particularly in the days of social media, are considered to be essential.
Oh, yeah, you need the tagline and the hit, don't you?
Well, more so than the technocratic abilities, which he prided himself in being. I run a government department, I'm a technocrat, I can actually run government and get things done. Well, some people think, well, that's great. I'm sick and tired of hearing these BSing politicians who keep on trying to sell me the same old soap powder. But, of course, again, going back to my analogy about, salesmen, of course, he was up against Nigel Farage, who is, again, despite all the faults, but he can sell stuff. I mean, despite Brexit being not considered to be a massive success, he's still there and actually, in contention to lead a government next time round. And I think also that's the other factor, isn't it? It's the threat of reform. And
the fear factor.
And the fear factor.
Yeah.
That
I think
we'll talk about. The papers will all...
knee-jerk reaction to that.
Yeah.
Right, so that's what we're going to be talking about at midnight. Do give me a call, 0344 499 1000. A quick break, and the papers next.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there, this is Talk and it is Petrie here with you, and with me is Andrew Hosken, who is a journalist, broadcaster, author, stuff, former BBC senior correspondent, and also my brother, just in case you were wondering. OK, let's have a look at The Sun, Andrew. He thinks it's all over, and it definitely is for Starmer. A bit of a weak headline there, but anyway, Andy Burnham could be Prime Minister on the eve of the World Cup final.
Well, yeah, of course, this is a pun, isn't it, on the commentary line
they think
in the
it's
World
all
Cup
over.
final in
It is now.
1966,
Yeah.
when Jeff Hurst popped the last ball, I think it was Jeff Hurst, wasn't it, for his hat-trick and beating the biggest half of Germany at the time, West Germany, 4-2. And so coincidentally, the 19th of July is the FA Cup final day. It's also the day of the summer parliamentary recess.
Right.
And also the date by which, Andy Burnham will almost certainly be Prime Minister. And so that would be the sort of election for the Prime Minister on the final day of Parliament, by the looks of it. And there's a picture of Andy Burnham, which I think is on the front page of most of the newspapers, and he's got his mobile phone up, and he's taking a selfie with himself, and it's in Westminster Hall,
Yes.
which is the oldest part of Parliament. It's it's where Charles I was tried for treason and later executed. Not there, but not far away.
It's
from
a
it.
cavernous, cold space now.
It's a
isn't
huge,
it?
amazing.
Yeah.
It's an amazing place. I think Edward III, he's got these put these wooden angels up at the thing that look down. It's an amazing.
It is an
It's
amazing
an amazing
place.
space. Yeah. And there's building works because, as we know, Parliament's falling down. It's going to cost the public about £3 billion to repair. And so there's Andy Burnham with all these very smiley Labour MPs behind him. And I think it's interesting because I think it's also saying, look, chum, is anyone thinking of challenging me? Well, I've got at least 80 MPs here.
Yeah,
so I think
at least.
you need 81 MPs.
Yeah.
To stand for an election. So he's basically saying, look, this is more than 81. There was a very funny joke, though, on X I saw, and someone said, oh, this is a photograph of Andy Burnham and the next bunch of Prime Ministers. There's a sort of a crack about all the number of people.
The revolving door. I mean, that's the thing, when they talk about Darren Jones to run against Burnham, he's got to get that 81. And is he going to get the 81?
No.
I mean, I don't think he is.
No, he's not.
He's not.
Because Darren Jones, I sort of know about Darren Jones. He's Bristol North West. I won't say why. But no one's heard of Darren Jones.
No one's heard of Darren Jones. He just happens to be an
I've
ally
heard of him. So no. I'm not the poor old Darren. I'm not. Lots of other people have heard of him, but not enough people.
Not enough people have heard of him.
And,
He's just an ally of Starmer's, isn't he?
He's got two hopes of becoming Prime Minister: no hope and Bob hope. That's not on. I mean, he's also will no doubt go on to it, but there's more detail given about this in the Times. But nevertheless, I mean, it's a funny sort of football joke. I mean, it's the Sun having doing what the Sun does best, combining two things,
two stories,
and having a bit of a laugh about it at the same time.
The thing is, like you said, the photograph is a better image of it actually on the front page of the Times.
Yeah.
Burnham angles for power. Newly sworn in MP could be Prime Minister next month after Starmer accepts desire for change with good grace. Although when he said good grace, I think he said it without good grace. Keir Starmer. It's a good speech, though.
I mean, I was sort of quite moved by it, and I think that there was all this talk, wasn't there, over the weekend that he was going to fight like a rat in a sack.
Yes.
And that proved to be completely untrue, as indeed lots of things about him have been proved to be untrue.
But he did say himself that he was going to
he did.
To fight.
I did. And I think
is this another U-turn? Is this what
No, I think it sort of was. impressed upon him over the weekend that he'd just forget about it. It wasn't going to, you know, going to happen. He wasn't going to get the support. I think there were people on the cabinet, like Yvette Cooper, who'd been very loyal up until then, the Home Secretary.
Who said you've got to
people
go.
like said,
Yeah.
everyone sort of... It reminded me a bit of when Margaret Thatcher was forced out in 1991, was it 19? Yes. And, you know, she made the mistake. I mean, what had happened was she didn't win. She didn't win enough in the first round, and there would have to be a second round. And she was going to stand in the second round. And then what happened? She famously invited all the cabinet members in, one by one, and they all said, "You forget about it. You're not going to win. It's all over. That's it." And it was pretty brutal. And, of course, she resigned in tears the following morning.
Yeah.
And that was the end of it. And it reminded me a bit of that. And I think once you lost support of the cabinet, you could forget about it. So there were people that he'd considered to be entirely loyal up until that time. Said, look, it's really over. You know, you've got all these MPs. None of you want to stand. So what do you do in those? What do you do in those circumstances? And I thought it was, to be honest, I thought it was a very dignified speech. I mean, it reminded me sort of, I don't know, that one of the few lines I know from Shakespeare, you know, the one from Macbeth, you know, nothing became him of his life but the leaving of it. You know, and I thought it was, and it was quite moving at the end when he was talking about his wife and his children.
His voice broke, didn't it?
His lovely wife and his kids. I thought that was genuine. It was genuinely meant.
It was heartfelt.
And he wasn't, you know, and actually he was saying, you know, he wasn't getting teared up about leaving the prime ministership and the number 10 law. So when he came to talking about his family, you can't fake that. I'm sorry,
no,
you can't.
That wasn't.
There's a lot of cynical people in politics. So I don't think you could fake that. And at the end of the day, we're all human beings. You wouldn't think it the way that some people responded to his resignation speech. I mean, some leading politicians were very ungracious about it, I thought.
Yeah, I agree with you on that.
With the exception of Ed Davey.
I mean,
you know, he's not an evil bad guy. He just wasn't that great at being prime minister. He certainly didn't deserve all the, you know, opprobrium and hatred that's been directed at him. I mean, yesterday on Father's Day, he put up a picture of his dad on Facebook or whatever, and you got all these idiots sort of, you know, spewing hatred and venom all over him. You know, over the fact that he sort of remembered his dead father on Father's Day. I mean, if we've come to that, really, is that really the sort of truly British? Is that the really truly British value that we like to think that we have?
But people do revel in the downfall of people in this country. I think.
Yeah, we like to haul people down. Also, social media gives lots of cowards an excuse and a way of attacking people.
That's why I don't use it.
Attacking people and getting away with it. People often whose air they're not fit to breathe, frankly, I would say, in lots of cases.
Well, they hide behind the keyboard. I've had lots and lots of very
I think it's pathetic, I really do. I do. You know, life's too short for that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But there it is. I mean, you know, so I think he was obviously angry and upset, as anyone would be, if being pushed out of that kind of role in such humiliating circumstances. I mean, so I saw on TV today, you know, people saying, oh, I thought he sounded quite bitter. Well, of course he is. I mean, you know, who wouldn't be? Anyone would be forced out if you're forced out of a job. Yeah, of course. So yeah, but nevertheless, you know, he has gone, and I think that he's had the country's and his own party's interests at heart in going, because he could have made a real unholy, you know, battle out of it.
An ego hash.
And all the rest of it, which would have caused more instability to the country and more instability to the party.
Although some people do think that he's already stymied Burnham by saying this has all got to be in place by, you know, everybody who's going to challenge now for Prime Minister they've got to be in by July 9th or whatever. That is too short a term, that he's set the dates for things to happen, and Andy Burnham's not happy that it will happen so quickly.
Oh dear, diddums.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, at the same time, he's being criticised. I mean, you can't win this.
No,
one.
you can't win.
You can either be accused of, you know, oh, you're just, you know,
hanging on there,
and you know, Billy no mates, and no one wants you around. You're hanging around like a bad smell, and then on the other hand, oh, you're doing it far too quickly. Oh, I don't have enough time to get. Yeah. I'm still having my suits made in Savile Row, and I won't be ready for my opening speech on the. You know, it's all nonsense. What can the poor man do? He said, OK, you want me gone, I'm gone.
I'm gone.
OK,
yeah. I'm not going to hang
luck.
around like a bad smell.
Farewell and thanks for all the fish.
Yeah.
You know, so Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Yeah, my favourite. Right, let's take a quick break. We'll come back and have a look at the Daily Mail.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hi there, this is Talk and it's Petrie, and with me Petrie Hosken, author and journalist and former BBC senior correspondent. The Daily Mail. As a tearful Starmer departs, his assassin arrives in Westminster in scenes of near hysteria. But Mail Readers poll says 89% say he's Messiah without a mandate, a Messiah in inverted commas there. So he doesn't have a mandate, but neither does anybody else who would want to be Prime Minister at this stage.
Yeah, they're suggesting that there should be a general election to somehow give him a mandate.
That always comes up every time as a leader swap.
It's a bit of a weaker argument for lots of reasons. I think the last Prime Minister to actually sort of resign after getting the job, was back in 1955 when Anthony Eden held an election after replacing Winston Churchill, and that was like almost 4 years into that Parliament. No one else has. I mean, there wasn't the Conservatives didn't hold an election when they got rid of Boris Johnson and then Liz Truss a couple of months later and replaced her with Rishi Sunak. So it doesn't really happen. And also, our unwritten constitution that doesn't say it says it has to happen at all.
No.
All our constitution says is that it should be a general election every 5 years, and that whoever can command the most, the command of the agreement of the most members of Parliament can form a government. If they go to the King or Queen and then ask to form a government. So there's no requirement on anyone to hold a general election.
And Andy Burnham's not going to call for a general election.
No, he's definitely not going to do that.
Definitely not.
And also, it's a bit sort of rum of someone like Nigel Farage to ask for a general. I mean, he's had three Conservative MPs have switched. They were voted in as Conservative MPs in 2024, then switched of their own volition to become Reform MPs. Yeah. And neither of them stood for re-election.
No, none of them have.
And Nigel Farage has defended that to the hilt.
Yeah.
So OK, he could say, well, that's all right, that's an argument, but this is different because it's the government we're talking about. But as I say, it's not like he'll be following radically different politics anyway. I mean, no, he's going to stick to the fiscal rules. There's probably the manifesto too. I mean, he'll obviously have to do something dramatic politically.
He will.
To prove as I say, to explain to the British people why he's helped cause this turmoil, topple the sitting Prime Minister,
and what he's
presumably
bringing to the
he
table.
can do something different. But in terms, and also going back to the Daily Mail, 89% of 60% online votes. I mean, I don't think most professional pollsters have any sort of, confidence in online polling. I mean, they're almost worthless. I mean, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're polling for the Daily Mail, I mean, you're almost certainly going to agree with Daily Mail politics. You're not going to be a big fan of Andy Burnham. I mean, it doesn't 60,000, you know, sort of reliking or you know, taking part in an online poll. That doesn't strike me as an overwhelming demand from the British people for a general election. And I think probably most people would rather not have another general election after having only had one 2 years ago and only just having participated
Well, like I was
in local
saying
elections
earlier,
a month ago.
You know, if we had to have a general election every time a leader was swapped, we'd have had 7 in the last 10 years.
Absolutely.
That's just, none of us want that.
And frankly, political parties get bankrupt themselves almost every time they have a general election. So a lot of them are still probably, you know, refilling their coffers after the last one. And the last thing they want, actually, is another one right now, I would say.
I mean, they've already, in Manchester, they're now going to have a mayoral election, and all of that is coming up.
That's going to be expensive.
That's going to be very expensive. I like this in the Daily Telegraph. Burnham set for coronation, but also he's not the Messiah, but a naughty boy.
Yes.
And this is because while Andy Burnham was in the Commons earlier, signing on as a new MP, a Tory MP shouted out, "You're not the Messiah," which is from the Life of Brian.
Yeah.
And because Brian's mother said he's not the Messiah, he's just a naughty boy, very naughty boy. And Andy Burnham replied, "Just a naughty boy," with a cheeky grin. So this is why we're seeing Messiah everywhere, is because this Tory went, "You're not the Messiah." And Andy Burnham, quick as a flash, actually did say "just a naughty boy," to parody that. But there will be some nervousness, I would imagine, amongst the Labour ranks at the moment, having now successfully bullied Starmer out or whatever, however it is they went about doing this, that Andy Burnham can actually, as you rightly say, prove why he's now so much a better choice for all the cost of this turmoil, not just in the country, but in the economics of the country, around the world. You know, our global position. Starmer was as much loved on the global stage as he was hated on the British stage.
Yeah, I mean, people internationally seem to have a lot of time for
the
European Union, NATO, and also Ukraine. I mean, President Vladimir
Zelensky must be worried.
Thought he was a great friend, and of course he didn't get Britain. And the other thing Keir Starmer did was not get involved in Trump's war in Iran, which lots of people who criticised Keir Starmer for lots of things wanted us to be involved in. But again, as you say, this issue of coronations and being the Messiah can be a double-edged sword for Andy Burnham.
Because he hasn't proved himself in any way to get this.
I mean, he earned the derision, didn't he, recently, of Tony Blair, who attacked him for a speech he gave when he said, Andy Burnham said, you know, there's everything's gone wrong in the last 30, 40 years with neoliberalism, he described it. And in that, he sort of threw into the pot privatisation and tax cuts and all the rest of it.
He wants to nationalise everything.
Well, but you see, you know, if you look at, for example, the water, you know, so the water companies, you know, have this probably the most important natural resource we have. And what have we got out of it, apart from rising bills, poo in the sea and the rivers, and these water companies paying huge dividends without investing in the infrastructure to their shareholders. And what a popular measure, and they're all bankrupt virtually anyway. So
they went in with no debt.
You could take over Thames Water tomorrow.
Free.
Just said, take it over. Right, goodbye, you know, Thames Water, and good riddance. And that could be a wildly popular measure. I mean, amongst all kinds of people.
It could be something that he would do. But this is what I'm talking about.
Dramatic.
He has to do something dramatic.
It'd have to be dramatic. Yes, of course, there'll be critics on the right saying, this is, you know, evidence of hard left, communism, all the rest of it. On the other hand, you know, Scotland haven't nationalised their water, so not many countries have gone down that road for the obvious reasons we're seeing now in England.
Quite.
And so, but
that could be something he does.
Something like that. Also, the railways, you know, that could also be another thing, which actually might not be that expensive, but would be very popular. Of course, you know, you'd have to do a bit better than British Rail did in the days that I remember British Rail.
Yeah, we used to travel a lot.
But things have changed. The other problem they have in terms of renationalising things, of course, we've lost their expertise, so-called. We had that expertise as much as it was in running these sort of public services, which we've now lost. But nevertheless, there are, you know, interesting partnerships you can do with public ownership. Where you would which you would then have.
I wonder if that's the big thing that he'll do.
I think it's possible. We don't know because he's hid his light under a bushel for a reason. But I think, as I say, to give a reason why he's done all of this, he's going to have to come up with policies which are going to sort of
shake up the
grab
yeah.
the public attention.
But I mean, I was saying earlier on to Vicky about the. You know, the defence spend, and because of what he did in Manchester, which was to say, in procurement terms, he was very good at procurement, and he made sure that in procurement terms he bought British, where he could, and that was extremely popular. So we could again see him doing something with the defence budget, as will happen with the DIP is coming out, isn't it? Eventually.
Well, of course, with defence, we've been cut out of a lot of the European procurement.
Yeah, we have now.
Because now these European countries are tooling up because of Russia.
Saying we'll buy European.
Yeah, absolutely. So yes, something needs to be done along those lines. But yeah, something dramatic and imaginative, you know, he will have to be announced to
fairly quickly.
Pretty much so.
Yeah. I think so as well.
I think he will. Incidentally, I think he's been planning for this for a long time.
Well, he's had 10 years to plan for this.
Yeah, I think so.
I mean, he's been planning for this for quite a long time. Talking of 10 years, the Daily Express today, as in Tuesday, marks 10 years since Britain voted to leave the EU. As Starmer finally falls on his sword and Britain faces a lurch to the left under Burnham, we call for politicians to finally believe in Brexit and deliver the will of the people. I think they've been trying to deliver the will of the people, but we just haven't had the trade deals that have come anywhere near what we lost.
Yeah, Brexit is leaving the European Union.
Yeah.
Which we did.
Yeah.
5 years ago.
Yeah.
And it reminds me a little bit of the communists, you know, who said, you know, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, you know, which collapsed because you couldn't buy anything.
Yeah. Had to have a wheelbarrow of money for a potato.
I mean, I had a taste. I went to Cuba, you know, under Castro. And it was pathetic, you know, the queues of bread and all the rest of it, all the fruits of communism, although they were also under blockade from America. But nevertheless, so there's an aspect of, OK, so what would you do
what is the Brexit
What
you
is a
want?
proper Brexit?
Yeah.
I mean,
nobody could answer that at the time.
The thing is, you cannot sell a sausage into the European Union unless you abide by their rules. The difference is now we have no say in making those rules. So for business people, you know, trying to trade with the European Union has been made more difficult because we've left the European Union and the single market and the customs union, so we now have to have all this paperwork to trade. So
to
people say,
prove
you know what, I'd love to trade with you guys in Britain, but we can't do. So the reset that has been done and what businesses have been asking, they haven't been asking to rejoin the European Union, but simply to get rid of some of these trade barriers caused by Brexit. So give us a proper Brexit. OK, Daily Express, well, what exactly do you mean by that? What do you mean exactly?
Yeah.
Because the more barriers you put up between ourselves and the European Union, the more expensive things become for us and more impossible it becomes for our business people to trade with the European Union, which, whether they like it or not, is our biggest trading partner. It accounts for more than 40% of our trade.
Yeah, I had something in my fridge the other day that has said not to be sold to the EU, and I thought, I'm not sure I like that.
Well, that's mainly because of Northern Ireland and Ireland. So it's to prevent. It is kind of to prevent food ending up in Ireland because we don't have the European Union doesn't have a proper border.
I know, but they've got standards to which I thought this food might not have matched.
Well, I don't think it does mean that, but it just means that it can't be sold in the European Union for all kinds of reasons. Some of it's because it doesn't meet the standards, but there are other reasons for it. But yeah, it's indicative of the fact that there are lots of things that are much more difficult to set into the European Union than it was, and that means we don't get as much tax revenue as we used to because we don't have as much trade.
Let's take a break. Back in a sec.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there, and a good evening to you. This is Talk, and it's Petrie here with you, and with me, Andrew Hosken, author, journalist, and former BBC senior correspondent, going through the papers. The I paper puts it bluntly: Prime Minister in 3 weeks. Burnham arrives for coronation, and you can see the result of that selfie. Actually, it appears. Actually, no, it isn't, because they're different people. But anyway, as one of the selfies that he took, that is the result of it, with all those people clamouring behind him, all going, "Give us a job, Andy.
Yeah.
Give us a job," because there'll all be horse trading going on at the moment, which is obviously what happened with Wes Streeting. The Metro, Keir's tears, Andy's crown. Emotional PM steps down.
Yeah.
The Guardian has got a very tragic photograph of Keir Starmer. I mean, he would have wished to have been on so many front pages when he was actually, well, he still is Prime Minister, but you know what I mean. He always failed to get his stories on the front page unless they were negative. Starmer bows out as Burnham swoops in.
Swoop,
That's certainly what it looks like. Regime change is the Independent. Emotional Starmer quits with good grace 2 years after huge win. Andy Burnham might be scared about what he's asked for, but he was, careful what you wish for. And the Daily Star, now put your money where your mouth is.
Yeah, there we are.
King of the North and South. Of course, I can claim that I was born up north. So,
yes, you were,
Stockport, Lassley, for all of 3 years.
Yeah, Manchester.
Manchester.
Yeah.
So King of the North and South. So there we go. That's Andy Burnham again. And the Daily Mirror, out of time. He stood up to Trump, lifted 500,000 kids out of poverty, protected workers and renters, yet the failures were glaring and magnified in our angry, divided world. In the end, a decent man tried his very best in an almost impossible job. And I think that's a fair summation, really. I think he is a decent man, but he just couldn't do it. But what interested me, Andrew, was that he was saying that he was really proud of lifting these 500,000 kids out of poverty. Number one, that wasn't in the manifesto, and number two, he was bullied into that by his backbenchers. But it's interesting how you revise that history.
It's funny.
He said it's his proudest thing, and he didn't even come up with it.
Well, no, but he did it.
He did it.
It's interesting because the two this conflict that people have over Keir Starmer was best expressed to me anyway, probably inadvertently, by Jess Phillips, who represents a very poor seat in the Midlands, and she was saying, she was sort of slagging off him, and she was sort of slagging off Keir Starmer. This is before he resigned, so last week. And of course, she resigned her ministerial position sort of in protest over Keir Starmer, and thought he had messed up things, particularly, his disastrous appointment of Peter Mandelson as the US ambassador, which in a way helped trigger the series of events which have led to his fall. And she was saying, "Oh yes, he's not very good at this, blah blah blah." She said, "Oh yes," and then she sort of said, sort of almost in passing, but he lifted 8,000 kids in my constituency out of poverty. And I thought, well, that shows the dichotomy when people come to Keir Starmer. They're sort of, he's not a great communicator, he's not a great Prime Minister, but yeah, he's done all this. He
did this, and the Renters' Rights Act, I think, is a brilliant thing to have gone through. It was Angela Rayner's baby.
He's done stuff, and I think it'd be churlish of people to say that he hasn't achieved things.
Yeah.
His main problem was communication.
They were terrible at it. The whole government were terrible.
Why he appointed so much, and I suspect that Andy Burnham will have much more talented communications people and communication strategists around him. And that's what you need, unfortunately, these days, particularly with a 24-hour cycle, 24-hour news cycle, and social media and all the rest of it. You need to be adept and quick on your feet, and able to get your message out.
Yeah.
And he wasn't that quick on the feet. I think he had some pretty lousy advisors around him.
I think he relied on the wrong people.
He did, I think, and that's been the tragedy for quite a few prime ministers going back.
Yeah.
One thinks of, Dominic, Cummings and Boris Johnson and Theresa May and her advisors and all the rest of it. These people can let you down. So I think he has been poorly advised. And I think particularly for someone who's not politically adept as him, I think really having really good advisors would have been essential.
Well, I mean, again, Keir Starmer reportedly wasn't very good at taking advice either.
Okay, yeah.
And he wasn't interested in certain voices and wouldn't take advice from them. He had his, it was known as the Boys Club of his, Morgan McSweeney and the boys around him.
It sounds like every prime minister who's ever been, frankly.
Yeah, but he didn't really listen to other voices and wasn't keen on taking that advice. So he's hoist by his own petard as well.
He
was the architect of his own downfall to some degree.
Clearly, but I think also, don't you think also, I think the thing that's really also made it sort of hectic and, the hysteria around it has been the rise of reform. I think that has been...
Without a shadow.
I think if Labour had been ahead in the polls and reform had been not doing that great, and the Tories, of course, are completely nowhere at the moment, if that had been the case, people could have... The Labour Party thought, well, OK, we can bumble along and we can probably win the next election because you've got 174 majority and no one else is contesting. The fact that reform were becoming such a force and threatening to take seats in the Conservatives and were high in the polls and the rest of it, that has been a major factor in triggering all of this.
But interestingly, of course, Makerfield has damaged reform as well.
Well, yes, it has, but of course it's got... how much of that was a victory for Labour, and how much of it was a personal victory for
Andy Burnham. Yeah,
and
that's
I think
true.
I think partly it was people always said, you could never count on for even a personal voting constituency for a very popular MP with more than 1,000, but I don't think that's true in Makerfield's case, particularly. It's in the Manchester. Yes,
we don't really know why they voted.
So it would have been a major factor, but yes, I mean when you consider that 6 weeks earlier, a lot of these people have voted for reform in the local elections. Yeah. It's quite a dramatic transformation. So that's bad news for reform. I noticed that Nigel Farage wasn't okay. He was saying there should be a general election, but he didn't sound massively keen on it happening right now. I have to say.
I agree with that. Yeah. I do. I think that he said it because that would be the party line.
As soon as possible.
As soon as possible. Yeah, not straight away, because they're not sure now.
That's right. Yeah, absolutely.
So all of the papers really looking at Alan Greenspan. Fed legend Alan Greenspan dies at the age of 100. Front page of the FT.
Right.
Greenspan, the Federal Reserve boss who gained public profile, rare for central bankers, but whose legacy was tarnished by the financial crash. He died at aged 100.
Yes.
He was lionised in Wall. I mean, everybody called him the Greenspan. I mean, he was the greenback and Greenspan, wasn't it? I mean, he was the Fed chair, but there you go. He's died at the age.
Yes, of course, he was the Fed chair at the time of the financial collapse in 2007, 2008, where
he had 20 years in charge.
Which was a massive failure, to be honest, because
it was a massive failure. But nonetheless, he's just that name that I just with everybody. It was omnipresent.
Well, he would have been in his 80s then.
He would have been.
So that was 2007. So he'd been in his early 80s. So he was an incredible figure, absolutely.
Absolutely, and for a long
historical figure. But of course, yes, he did somewhat tarnish his legacy.
Yeah. Yeah. But I suppose he was rich enough to see him way to a comfortable 100. Yeah. Just before we go, very, very quickly, because I've only got a minute, Ed Miliband, the potential of him being Chancellor of the Exchequer, I think it would be Wes Streeting, but there was some potential, because he's great mates with Andy Burnham. Yeah, and of course he also told Andy Burnham to go, which wouldn't have... wouldn't have done his chances much harm with Andy Burnham. I think there could be difficulties. I mean, Darren Jones, who's the Chief Secretary to the Prime Minister, he's the one who's threatened to toss his hat into the ring. I think the Times suggests it's because he's against, for some reason, Ed Miliband becoming Chancellor. I mean, this is all
part of the gossip that's making its way into the front pages. But yeah, that would be very interesting to see what jobs people get and what job.
I agree, and I think Andy Burnham's
gets.
got to play it fairly central, actually, because he's such you know, sort of left of Labour. I think he's going to have to. That's why I think Wes Streeting will get a big job, if not Chancellor.
Well, he's decided not to stand for leadership, so he must have been promised something.
Yeah, the horse trading went on.
Yeah,
I'll leave you alone, mate, if you give me one of the big jobs. Andrew, thank you very much indeed. Andrew Hosken.
People do call me Andy as well.
I know.
The question my party is asking now is whether I am best placed to lead us into the next general election. I have heard the answer of my parliamentary party to that question, and I accept that answer with good grace. Every decision I've taken has been about putting the country I love first. That is why I will resign as leader of the Labour Party.
Well, you know what? In the end, he did do the right thing, and there were some achievements, and he's an honourable man, and he cared about public service. Guys, that's not what happened just now. In the last half an hour, Keir Starmer resigned, and he resigned because he was pushed. Most of his issues, most of the things which have damned him from, let's face it, within days, within weeks of him becoming Prime Minister back in July 2024, or of his own making. They were things he chose to do, cutting the winter fuel allowance, damning everybody who wanted to have a public inquiry on the grooming gangs as jumping onto the far-right bandwagon, the two-tier policing after the Southport riots. This man brought it on himself. He was not a good Prime Minister.
There was two things on that manifesto. One was a picture of Keir Starmer and the word change. Well, promise made and promise delivered in that sense. If he's not, let's be honest. But look, I mean, I don't really want to make light of it, but I am cheesed off, Julia, because what we promised in opposition was competence, and it's been anything but. I'm embarrassed. I'm really, truly, honestly, I am embarrassed, because I did think we would be competent. We've not been.
I've no idea whether there'll be a contest or a coronation. But what I do know is the British public have simply had enough of political parties chopping and changing their leaders at will. We vote for somebody in a general election to be our Prime Minister. We expect them.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning. It is Talkback, and it is Petrie. The question I have for you this morning, of course, it is on the back of us getting yet another Prime Minister, Andy Burnham, or whoever it is, and my money would be on Burnham as it is everybody else's, but will be the seventh Prime Minister we've had in 10 years. That's a lot, right? I mean, that's embarrassingly a lot when you consider that actually it should be two. In terms of the length, the term lengths of any particular party. So we've had 7. Or we will have 7, probably by the middle of July. And I just wonder, it just made me question whether that makes us ungovernable in some way, that maybe... what is going on that we've had so many Prime Ministers? I mean, I will say this again and again. I'm grateful for the fact that we can at least get rid of leaders who are not up to scratch. I'm absolutely thrilled that is a political possibility in this country, because there are many countries where that cannot happen, or it can't happen as easily as it does here. Maybe it's too easy, I don't know. But it's not us, is it? I mean, we let it be known that we don't like the Prime Minister, then the party, on our say-so, then attacks the Prime Minister and gets rid of him or her for us. So now we've got Andy Burnham, by the looks of it, That seems to be the way we're going now, and I just wonder, actually, if he's going to have to do something remarkable, right, to prove why he did this, or why he was part of the architecture of this. But anyway, I just wanted to do a sort of quick roundup, if you like, of the day, because it has been phenomenal. Labour don't tend to get rid of their leaders as easily and as quickly as they got rid of Starmer. Many people saying that it is a threat from reform that has made them particularly nervous about the next election. But Keir Starmer, of course, he resigned this morning, first thing this morning. Here's part of his speech.
Every decision I've taken has been about putting the country I love first. That is why I will resign as leader of the Labour Party. I have spoken to His Majesty the King this morning to inform him of my decision. I will ask the National Executive Committee of the Labour Party to set out a timetable with nominations opening on the 9th of July and completed by the summer recess. In the case of a contest, this will ensure a new leader is in place before Parliament returns in September.
So that's the timetable that everybody was asking for. He said that he'll carry on as Prime Minister until such time as there is a new leader. Well, if there is no contest, that could be as soon as July the 15th, which is the day that the recess starts, the recess starts. Well, the leader of the opposition, Kemi Badenoch, of course, had a comment to make as well.
We need to ask why he set out this timetable. What are we waiting for? There are critical decisions that need to be made, and the Prime Minister is setting out his farewell tour while Andy Burnham wants a summer holiday. It's really, really important that we ensure that the country is being governed. Keir Starmer has had to resign because his Defence Secretary said he was not looking after national security. Whatever happens now, we need to make sure that national security is the #1 agenda, and that means that Andy Burnham needs to explain where the money to fund our defence is coming from, and he needs to cut welfare to pay for defence.
So that's what Kemi Badenoch had to say about it. And it's not, it's a little unreasonable to say we won't have a Prime Minister. Keir Starmer will continue on in that role, pretty much as a lame duck, but he can still affect policies. He can still change things. He can still make things happen that Andy Burnham would then have to live with. So he's not that lame a duck, right? But of course, there are those now calling for a general election. Here's Richard Tice from Reform.
Burnham, as the only applicant, would then be Prime Minister. And I've got an interesting tweet. There's always a tweet, Julia.
Yep.
If I can just read this out to you. From Andy Burnham, 3 years ago. We need to start demanding a general election at the end of this Tory leadership election. Well, well, well. That was Andy Burnham actually 4 years ago in 2022. So we're saying stick by your word, be consistent, Andy, and when you're Prime Minister, call a general election, because you've got no mandate whatsoever to impose upon the nation your vacuous, wishy-washy socialist policies. Not that anyone knows actually what you stand for, except that you want to change the existing policies. Put them to the British people, and Reform will beat you and will save Britain.
So that's Richard Tice. Of course, that's slightly hypocritical because Reform hasn't insisted on any of their people leaving the Tory party or any other party to join Reform having to stand in a by-election. So, as I said, politics is full of hypocrisy, isn't it? But look, that's just a brief sort of roundup. But Andy Burnham, of course, looks like it is going to be a coronation. He is absolutely going to have more than 81, which he needs 20% of ministers, and he's absolutely got that already. I don't think anybody else will get that. Wes Streeting, who was the #1 challenger to Keir Starmer, he said he was going to put himself forward. Al Cairns said he was going to put himself forward as well as other people have talked about putting themselves forward. to mount a challenge against Keir Starmer. Well, now Keir Starmer, of course, has resigned. He is not going to be standing in any leadership challenge, and it looks like everybody else has melted away. I would have expected today for there to be a few more voices saying, well, actually, I am going to stand against Andy Burnham, setting out their stall. They've been very, very quiet. So it does look like it will be a coronation. I think anybody else putting themselves forward will find that they just will not get the votes that they need in order to mount that challenge against Andy Burnham now, not against Keir Starmer, because he's gone. He's not anywhere now. So this would be a challenge against somebody who isn't even Prime Minister. This would be a challenge against Andy Burnham, which I don't think will come. So we could have this Prime Minister, Andy Burnham, by the 15th of July, which is not that far away. So we're looking at a matter of a couple of weeks. 7 prime ministers in 10 years. Are we ungovernable? And should every time there's a new leader of a party, there be a general election? We would have had to have had 7 in the last 10 years. 7. We can barely bother ourselves to get up and vote once every 5 years, let alone every year and a bit. Anyway, do you think that would be better? Do you think that would be better for the country? Give me a call, 0344 499 1000. Those calls are charged at the national rate, but we do call you back. And text the word talk and your message to 87222. Let's go to Mark, who's in Lincolnshire. Good morning, Mark.
Good morning, Petrie.
What do you make of all this kerfuffle, then?
Yeah, I mean, it was quite an interesting stat, wasn't there? What is it? The last 10 years, I think the longest-serving Prime Minister is, of all people, Boris Johnson.
Yeah.
Which is quite statistic.
Which is extraordinary, isn't it? When you when you think about it. And the shortest one, of course, Liz Truss.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's just an interesting time, isn't it? Really.
But why is it happening so often? I mean, this is the thing. In 10 years, we've had, since the 1970s up until Brexit was 7, and since Brexit, which is 10 years, we've had 7.
I think it's just a general impatience, I think.
I think so as well, yeah.
I think if you look at society as a whole, I mean, we've gone from a society that was actually pretty well ordered. You know, you had your... People would go to work, they would come home, you had your soaps, you had your football, whatever. Everything was scheduled. Do you know what I mean? Everything was
I get it.
In its slot, everything was as it was. And then what you've seen over the last 10, 15 years is this move towards on demand. So everything's on demand, so you can watch your soaps whenever you want now. Yeah. You can watch your news whenever you want. You can basically watch anything you want, anytime you want.
You don't have to save your pocket money to go down the shops on a Saturday to buy a single, do you? You can now just download it immediately.
Yeah, it's all instant gratification.
Yeah, it is.
And then you move into stuff like, what is it? I think it's 80% of UK adults engage with social media every day, so they're scrolling through their phones all the time. So it tends to be a case of when prime ministers are coming in, I think it's that, as I say, that people just seem to want that instant hit.
Yeah.
That, you know, well, you promised me this at the election. Why haven't I got it yet? Do you know what I mean? I
totally agree with you, and I do think that has a lot to do with it, that we are impatient, we do suffer with this instant gratification, and we don't give people time to achieve anything anymore, I think, in politics. We want it now. We want it yesterday.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's... I mean, ultimately, it will be a destructive way to go, to be honest, because we'll never get anywhere. I think, as you mentioned earlier, you know, the top of the show, really, you end up with a very much an ungovernable country.
Yeah.
Because, you know, it was always bad enough within politics to get a government to actually plan something longer term.
Yeah.
Because, again, if you actually go back through history, if you look over the decades, you know, when you're talking like the 50s, you know, post-war stuff, there was actually quite a lot of forward planning, you know, where they were putting in policies that would take 10, 15, 20 years to come to fruition. But they were doing it because there was a need to do it, because it was post-war, there was a lot of destruction, there was, you know, a lot of unemployment, all the rest of it.
But everything took time, right? And I think we expected it to. But now, it's if we don't deliver, you know, if Labour doesn't deliver that 1.5 million houses in the first 6 months, then they failed to deliver those houses, right? And that's what everybody's talking about. It's like, well, they promised us all these homes and they haven't materialised, so they failed. It doesn't necessarily mean they have failed. I think they are going to fail on that, but you know, I think that we want it now, and we can't have everything now.
Well, this is it, but unfortunately, that as I say, that's the way society is now.
Yeah.
You know, you can't. It's like I was going to say. I mean, even myself, I've noticed. I mean, I hope you've always got the impression when we've spoken on the show. I'm not necessarily somebody that's got a short attention span, but even now myself, I find myself a real struggle to watch a 2-hour film.
Oh, I'm with you. Honestly, Mark, I'm totally with you. And I've had to take up knitting to stop my... No, seriously, to stop myself from enjoy, you know, to stop myself from scrolling or from doing something else while I'm watching a film. So I'm a terrible knitter, but I'm knitting acres and acres of rubbish. But because it keeps my, you know, I'm not then looking at my phone and looking at news. I've had to find a way of distracting myself from and concentrating on a movie that I'm watching.
Well, this is it. I mean, good for you, by the way.
Yeah, I recommend it, actually.
I'm not, if it's okay, I'm not going to join you in starting knitting.
It's very macho now.
Well, perhaps it is these days. I don't know.
Yeah.
I was with my grand knitting. Anyway, I just think, yes, I've had my fair share of hand knitted gloves and hats.
Oh,
and
lovely.
what else.
Can't beat them.
Can't beat them at all. Always the best ones to have.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just think, as I say, I mean, how we go forward, I'm not really sure, because I don't think. I mean, I've always said, you know, reform in themselves. I think if you listen to, I mean, I don't know whether you do or not. You probably don't listen to the show as much as I do, like the station as much as I do myself. Because I always tend to have you guys on. I've mentioned to you before, I'm housebound. So
Yeah.
I tend to have you guys on in the background quite a lot. As I'm pottering about, because everything takes me hours to do. So anyway, when I listen to the callers that call in and stuff, and I've been thinking this for a while, that should reform get into government, which I don't personally want, but they haven't got long to do something, because the people that are supporting them, certainly the ones that bring into this station, I don't think they're going to be waiting very long.
No, I completely agree.
To get the results that they expect.
Yeah, and they will expect on day one for the boats to stop and you know, all of these things that are being promised to them, and we know there are international laws, there are problems. I mean, I think that this government has done a woeful job, but they have cut the number of boats coming across, not by enough, but they have done that. But they don't. They're just. You know, everybody wants it done now, and I just don't think that we're ever going to be satisfied with that. So what do we end up with? Like, we do end up then with a country that goes, no, next person, next one, let's see if you can do any better, and we just don't move forward.
Well, this is exactly it. I mean, you can, again, I mean, I'm not trying to pick on reform here, but when you actually look at how they operate as a party, obviously, they're very much a populist thing, but even the way they communicate as a party, there's very little on actual detail. It's very much seems to be based on, you know, like say for example, you'll have a story on one of the shows on Talk, and you can almost guarantee within an hour or 2 hours or so there'll be a tweet. There'll be something out from Reform that will say, well, we're going to stop that, we're going to do this, we're going to do...
But there's no detail on
the sheer
how.
amount of stuff,
Yeah.
you know, it's not like they're just promising one or two things. It's this whole raft of stuff that they say they're going to fix, that, quite frankly, even if I thought for a second they were the best political party ever to exist in the entire world, ever, they couldn't do this stuff. There's that much stuff that they're claiming they're going to do.
Yeah.
It would be a literal impossibility, certainly within a 5-year term. And I just think that, you know...
I think politicians also set us up for disappointment, right? They all claim they're going to be different. They all claim they're going to deliver. They all claim, I mean, like Labour, we're going to be totally different to the Tories, and they've in fact turned out to be a carbon copy. You know, we're not going to have any corruption. We're not going to have any of this. And then the first week we were talking about Keir Starmer's suits and glasses that he was gifted, you know, and we were going, oh, so you're just the same. And then we get, you know, all of this. So they set us up for disappointment. They promise us, they overpromise, and then fundamentally underdeliver, which is what makes us impatient as well. Because it's like, oh, here we go again.
Because, it's like you said, they just set their own goals way too high in order to get elected.
Yeah.
You know, and
we believe it every time that they're going to deliver, and then they don't deliver, and then we're annoyed by it.
Yeah, I mean, it's, you know, Farage the Mirage. He's just doing his thing.
I've never heard that before. I like that. But you think?
Well, he'll disappear as quick as they come. You know, I don't even see him staying. If they were the next government, I don't think he'd even see the full 5 years. I think he'd get bored.
I don't think he will. I don't think he wants to. I think he's already said that. I think he's not really the nuts and bolts of the job. No, I can't see Farage wanting to do that. I think that he would get them there, and then step back. That's what I think he would do. But your initial call was to say that you thought that Burnham should throw a general election. Do you still believe that?
No. Well, you see, I've been thinking about this through the day, and mainly it came back from the reform thing, because they're quite insistent they want this snap election. And my thoughts on it was that once I'd actually thought about it, I've kind of gone both ways on this, but I've kind of settled on what I'm going to tell you, which is, I've been thinking about, because I'm from up north. I'm originally from the northeast. And the way I see this, reform will be shooting themselves in the foot. I think if Burnham was to call a snap election, he would decimate them. He would absolutely bury them.
Do you think?
Yeah, I absolutely do. The reason why I say that is because I know Northerners, because I am one, and I know the fact that reform would have to rely incredibly heavily on the red wall. In order to win an election, they need the red wall. Now, a lot of those red wall voters are Labour voters that have moved over to reform.
Yeah.
However, they will happily dump reform in a second if they think they can get old Labour back. Now,
and a northern powerhouse like Andy Burnham. Absolutely.
Yeah,
I agree.
They view Andy Burnham as old Labour. You know, I've heard lots of people on the station today refer to him as a progressive and all the rest of it. But the reality is, people in the north don't really see him like that. They see, obviously, he talks like them. He talks about the same kind of things that maybe a similar kind of rhetoric that you might have got from Labour back in the 80s.
I totally agree. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a very good point you're making.
Especially with his accent.
Yeah.
You know, when you combine that with the accent, that's actually quite convincing. And this is what I'm saying. If there was a snap election, I mean, essentially, reform's best option would be to let him hang himself, basically, over the 2.5, 3 years.
Yeah, very wise. Yeah.
If that's the case, you know, that would be a much better idea for them. Because, as I say, in my opinion, if he did call one, which is why, you know, obviously, in that case, it would actually be quite beneficial for Burnham to do it, which is...
Then he gets a mandate. Yeah, but I agree with... Do you know what? I agree with you. I've not even thought about it in those... I mean, I just don't think it's going to happen. But I think you make an excellent point. And maybe that's why Nigel Farage wasn't calling for the election straight away. He was going, you know, soon. You know, I don't think he was convinced by his own argument. And potentially that's because of the pasting they took at Makerfield.
Yeah, I mean, that if nothing else, you know, yes, it was to get Starmer out, but a large part of that was also because it was Andy Burnham.
Yeah. Yeah,
You know,
I think you make an excellent point.
He has huge pulling power in the north.
Yeah. I genuinely, Mark, you've really, I love it when I learn something, and I think that that's a really, really smart comment to have made, actually, about Andy Burnham. I don't think it'll happen, but nonetheless, I think it was a brilliant comment. So thank you. Thank you, Mark, for calling in. I've got to take a break because I'm really late, but I'll be back in a sec.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, good morning. This is Talk, and it is Talk Back. We've been talking about the fact that we've got this will be our 7th Prime Minister in 10 years. And I've been asking the question if we're ungovernable. I've got some great messages coming through. This one just says, it's not signed, unfortunately, but it says, Larry the Cat has accepted Keir Starmer's resignation as chief servant and has invited Andy Burnham to lay out details for how many meals a day he'll give. You forgot treats as well. I'm sure that Larry the Cat is very keen on the treats as well. We haven't seen Larry for a while, have we? I haven't seen him dotted about. Gary and Polly say, I've long thought that politicians can no longer run a country. Instead, each department should be run by experts. The fighting between each other is really not good for running a country. I've always thought that certain aspects of the country should be removed from politics, and therefore there's long-term planning for it. Things like the NHS should be cross-party, and probably defence as well, to be fair. Catherine says, what's causing frustration isn't that the country is ungovernable. It's the constant U-turns and the gap between what was promised in the manifesto and what has been delivered. If there was clear leadership, honesty about changes in direction and less spin, I think you'd find the British people far more supportive and respectful. And that's from Catherine. Yeah, I do agree with that. And I do think they overpromise and then they underdeliver and then we get frustrated. And also, as you say, the lying and the spinning and the, you know, all of that nonsense that goes in, and then introducing things that weren't in the manifesto, like getting rid of juries and huge decisions like that, which I don't think we would have voted for. You know, and digital ID, which I definitely wouldn't go anywhere near a party that wanted that. Not that I voted Labour in the last election anyway. But let's chat to Paula now, who is normally from Halifax, but is away on holiday and still listening. We love you for that, Paula.
Oh, hello.
You're still listening on holiday. Oh,
I am.
That's dedication. That is dedication.
It is dedication. I love talkTV.
Good. I'm so glad. What do you make of this latest Prime Minister to bite the dust?
Well, I didn't even know what was going on. Obviously, when you're on holiday, you're like here, there, and everywhere. And I turned the news on tonight, and the TV didn't work, so I had to ring the reception and said, "Can you send some guys down to fix it?" I said, "I can't stand not having TV." So the latter of the 6 o'clock news.
All right.
I just caught, and then I rang my mum. I said, "Mum," I said, "is Keir Starmer resigned?" She says, "Yeah."
Oh, wow.
And I said, "Well, what bleep are we going to get in next?"
Yeah, well, Andy Burnham.
Yeah.
I mean, look...
That's him from Manchester, but I don't mind him, though.
Yeah, no, I don't. We don't really know an awful lot about who he is. There's a couple of things that I do like about what he said, but he's also gone back on a couple of things that he said. So I'm not. The jury's out for me. I don't know who he is. What I do know is that he has got to do something fairly big, fairly quickly, in order to get people on his side and to prove that it's worthy of all this turmoil.
Yeah, definitely. But don't you find, Petrie, that once they promise the world, and once they get into the government, they do the opposite.
Yeah, yeah. I think they mean it when they trying to get into government. I genuinely think they mean it, but I do think that there's so much red tape. Westminster is not a healthy place, right? The people go in there full of dreams and hopes, and then they're stifled by red tape and they're stifled by laws, and quite rightly. So they can't always do what they want to do, and then they get sort of jaded by the whole process, and then they just take the money and go home.
I mean, I do get that. I mean, I'm not a massive fan of Nigel Farage. I remember when Donald Trump first went for president in the USA.
Biden.
When he first went.
Yeah.
You know, Nigel Farage was there. Trump. And I'm thinking, well, Trump just says it all.
Yeah, and look at what's happened with the Trump presidency. It's a disaster for America. Although he's going to say that it isn't, but it's.
It is so.
Yeah.
You know, I do know my stuff, and I'm just like, what the hell? And it's like something like 8 presidents in our country within the last 10 years.
We've had, this will be the 7th Prime Minister in 10 years, which is just over a year. If you average it out, it's just over a year, isn't it? A year and a bit each. I mean, that's just not how to run a country, right? That's not how. We should have had 2 in 10 years.
I just think it's disgusting, and I fear for my mum. I fear for the elderly. You know, oh bless them. You know, how they're going to manage when they're just taking money away from them.
I don't know. I mean, listen, let's hope that Andy Burnham, like I said, I don't know enough about him. I know a bit about his past, but I don't know what he stands for now. I don't know what he wants for the country. Is he going to renationalise stuff? What's he going to do? So we have to wait and see. He could be the best thing that's ever happened to this country. He could be the worst. But we just have to wait until we can always get him out in 3 years. So, yeah, just get rid of another one if we don't like him.
Just shout next.
Yeah, next one. Revolving door. They need to put a revolving door on number 10, and have done with it. That's what I say, Paula. Listen, where are you on holiday?
I'm at Skipsy Sands. It's the East Coast. It's absolutely boiling, and I'm in a log cabin.
Oh wow! How nice! Are you near the beach?
Yeah, right near the beach. I've got my scooter.
Oh, it sounds lovely. Well, listen, you enjoy that, and thank you for being so loyal and sticking with us even if you're on holiday. Lots of love to you, Paula. So, what do you think about the fact that we've got yet another Prime Minister on the way? Like I said, he could be the best thing. Could be. I mean, look, I am not party political. I hate all of them. But, you know, if he is brilliant, if he isn't, we just get rid of him as well. Not a problem, is it? Quick break, back in a sec.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk. Oh.
Good morning. It was a big day yesterday, wasn't it? The Prime Minister of the country resigned. Well, he resigned as a Labour Party leader, which was a knock-on effect of him resigning as Prime Minister. So we've got another one in the wings. It looks like it's going to be Andy Burnham, I think unchallenged. I think it's unlikely that he'll face a significant challenge. Anyway, Wes Streeting, who was the #1 challenger, wasn't he, has certainly said that he's now spoken to Andy Burnham and is not going to challenge for leader. Big job on the way. Possibly my money would be on Chancellor of the Exchequer or Defence Secretary, but I think it will be Chancellor, in order for him to not mount a challenge, so that it's basically a coronation. It wouldn't be the first time we've seen a coronation, of course. Gordon Brown was coronated after Tony Blair, so it does happen. Steve has sent a message saying in all aspects in life regarding managing, running a house, business, a football team, political parties, etc., etc., everyone needs to be fully behind and support the vision moving forward. United we stand, divided we fall. What I see in the Labour government is not too dissimilar as the previous government. The Tory party politicians were not all singing from the same hymn sheet and creating unrest from within. No matter what leader was put in place, it was never going to succeed due to the many fractions and factions internally. I see history repeating itself, showing signs of unrest within the party. Therefore, if the party are not united, then it proves they are not fit for purpose and unable to remain in power. I thus refer back to the public to have their say by calling a general election. And that's from Steve in Leamington Spa. Yeah, it is interesting, isn't it, that they were not singing from the same hymn sheets in the Tories, and I don't think they were in Labour. Is that possible? And this is why referendums, coalitions, don't work. This is why coalitions don't work, because they're not singing from the same hymn sheet. That's why nothing gets done in coalition governments. Well, look, earlier on I was talking to the political correspondent at the Sunday Times, that being the marvellous John Boothman, about just how remarkable the last few days have been.
It's been an amazing, really, few days. Who would ever have thought that someone could win a by-election, not being in Parliament beforehand, and end up and what are we talking about by July the 15th being the Prime Minister? You know, it's a very, very unusual set of circumstances, hence people calling for something like an election, though in reality, I think you're absolutely right. I don't think that's going to happen. One of the things that the SNP in Scotland were calling for today was an election, and everybody knows the SNP don't have the money to fight one. But, you know, there's a whole variety of considerations there. But, you know, I've had an interesting day talking really to lots of Labour people, a mixture of sadness about Starmer going, because they do have some residual gratitude towards them for changing the Labour Party, taking them to victory 2 years ago. But to be fair, a bit of a sense of relief that the game's over, that by and large the suggestion there might be a coronation probably suits them. There's been too many mistakes from Starmer, no matter what his achievements, but you know, there's not really a lot of sentiment in politics. The king is dead, long live the king, in this case the king of the north, by the looks of it.
So John Boothman there reflecting on what has been an extraordinary few days. Joanna has said, we're not ungovernable, we were deceived. Starmer's manifesto was sparse, but he did not do anything he said he would, for example, increase defence spending when he's actually decreased it. In the build-up to the election, he led people to believe he would do things like the WASPy women, and then it wasn't in the final draft. Very big ticket items were not in the manifesto. A lot of people would not have voted Labour if they had known. Digital ID, removal of juries, the Chagos deal debacle, or bringing in Lords to try veterans of Ireland, despite the IRA not being answerable, etc., etc. And Joanna makes excellent points there. I mean, we have been deceived, we have been let down, but we're lied to all the time, but we believe it. I mean, surely we've got to stop believing manifestos, haven't we? Anyway, good points, but very well made. Well, we do know something about Keir Starmer, and that is, although he was deeply unpopular here at home, in fact, he was very rarely here, never here. Keir was certainly one of his nicknames. He was successful and highly regarded on the world stage. So the question is Andy Burnham going to be able to cope with the geopolitics, which are very, very much at the forefront of our success or failure as a nation right now? Some very important things are happening on the world stage. Well, earlier I asked the founder and editor of EA Worldview and the professor of international politics, Scott Lucas, how does this look on the world stage with 7 UK prime ministers in just 10 years?
I think there's a paradox here. I think, as you quite rightly mentioned, in some respects, Britain has been more than pulling its weight on the world stage under the Starmer government. As you rightly noted, Britain has a very important place in terms of the ongoing support for Ukraine against the Russian invasion. Starmer, I think it'd be difficult for anybody to navigate Donald Trump, but I think he navigated him quite well at important points. Think back to that critical moment when Trump was going to cut Ukraine loose entirely, and Starmer pulled him back in by offering the state visit from King Charles. I think while Starmer handcuffed himself, and I'm just going to say personally, I think unwisely, by ruling out going back into the single market, I think European leaders saw Starmer as someone who genuinely wanted to rebuild the relationship with Europe, while in effect be limited in what he could do. I think he's done as much as he can in terms of the current Middle East crisis, because to be honest with you, I don't think Europe and the UK are at the center in terms of what's happening there. I could give you that whole list there, but I think the paradox is that domestically, and it's not as much Starmer, but it's as much as Britain is seen as having caused this huge self-inflicted wound 10 years ago, you know, as we come up to the anniversary. And I know a lot of people who watch your station aren't going to like that, but the fact remains that that was an act of isolation to some respects. You know, you may support it, but you were cutting yourself off from Europe, and you really weren't going into a replacement. And I think the way that you've looked at it And what has struck me about this, because I listened to that very good summary you gave a few minutes ago, is that each of the UK prime ministers has been brought down by the legacy of Brexit. That's the interesting thing. I mean, David Cameron, quite obviously, because of the referendum. Theresa May, because there were others who objected to the way she was conducting the negotiations, especially Boris Johnson, who was supported by the Trump people to come into power. Then Johnson falls in large part because of COVID, although Brexit plays a part. Rishi Sunak, well, sorry, how could I forget Liz Truss? How could I forget Liz? How could I forget those magical 42 days or whatever it was, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think we know that, the risk of economic implosion there. I'm sorry, I'm looking at Lord Buckethead going, this may be the appropriate analogy for what we're talking about. And then you get to Rishi Sunak, who can't right the ship either. And then it's Labour's turn to inherit the economic issues, to be honest with you. And I think it's really interesting, Patrick. I do a lot of work with Polish television, a very good outlet called TVP World. And it's really interesting. I've talked to their folks. I've gotten to know them quite well. And they talked about how, you remember 20, 25 years ago, we in the UK looked upon Poland as being that place out in Europe that, they had to send us all their people to make a bit of money and to send back. Poland now has about 86% of the GDP that Britain has. It's not quite as close on a per capita basis.
But it's doing brilliantly.
It's doing really well.
Yeah.
Since it joined the EU. And I think you could say that for several other countries that have joined the EU. And I think, again, I'm trying not to beat people over the head, but I think there's another analogy when you look at prime ministers and you look at it. Remember how we used to talk about Italy would have the rotating door on prime ministers, and they did.
They did.
Well, Giorgia Meloni's been there for a few years now, right? And the thing about Giorgia Meloni is, although she's very, very right-wing, especially on issues like immigration, she made that decision not to pull Italy out of Europe, out of the EU, precisely because Italy had too much to lose economically by coming out. And that has given the Italians a measure of political stability that we wouldn't have even thought they had about 15 years ago.
Yeah, I don't think it's any coincidence that it's the 10-year anniversary of Brexit, and we've had 7 prime ministers in those 10 years because of the economic hit. So with the economic hit, what is it, 100 billion a year or something down from GDP, that the prime ministers have failed to meet our expectations. Certainly because there hasn't been the money, and that's what pushes taxes up, and that's what makes us all feel pretty miserable. But Andy Burnham, he is going to have to be on the world stage, isn't he? As much as he says he doesn't want to be, he's going to have to step into Keir Starmer's shoes, which I think, as much as he's failed here, he has succeeded overseas.
Well, you put it that way, and there's sort of an upside and a downside here. The upside here is that I think there will be a honeymoon period for Burnham, and that world leaders will realize he's got a task on his hands. Right? Now, paradoxically, having come out of Europe, Burnham's a little bit shielded on the Ukraine issue because, of course, that is a European issue. And there are other European leaders that I think you'll see Emmanuel Macron continue to be at the fore, Friedrich Merz, Meloni will still be there, and so on. I think he's kind of sheltered on the Iran / Israel / Middle East issue, again, because it's the Gulf states that I think are on the forefront of that. Even a country like Pakistan with the mediator's role. So you've got the Europeans that are there. Tariffs have kind of, they're still in a nuisance, but we've kind of gotten used to them, the 15% tariff from the States. If Trump doesn't kick up a fuss there, then I think he's got some time. And also, despite, Trump's rather nasty farewell message to Keir Starmer, I don't see him coming in and putting the boot in on Burnham immediately.
Do you not think he's going to test that, though? He is going to test Burnham straight away and push him and try to prove that he's the big dog. He's the boss. He said that at G7.
Except for a couple things. One is Trump has got an awful lot on his hands now, especially for someone who, as someone talked about the other day, like a reactionary butterfly jumping from issue to issue. And the fact here is he's got Iran, which is an absolute mess right now for the Americans. He's got a lot of domestic problems building up in the United States. His approval ratings are sinking. I think some of Trump's folks have the UK in their targets. But I think the second issue here is the Trump folks have been actively working with reform to get Starmer out. And I'm happy to talk to you all about that at some point, because it's there. This started back in January 25 when Trump came into office. Elon Musk called for Starmer to be put in prison. Well, they got their man in a way, right? And I don't think necessarily they're going to go for Burnham the same way they went for Starmer immediately, because reform's got its own issues right now. And that is that by-election last week, that Makerfield by-election, as much as it was the final blow to Starmer, it's a big blow to reform as well.
Yeah, they thought they were going to walk that.
They thought they were going to walk it, and now their problem here is that, okay, you can gun for Burnham, which they already will, but they're being outflanked on the hard right by Restore, and that scrap between Rupert Lowe and Nigel Farage is going to take up a bit of bandwidth. So I'm not saying Burnham's going to get a free pass if he comes in. I think you've talked about the acceleration of the news cycle, where prime ministers come under a greater scrutiny. But I think he's got a bit of a period of time. But having said all that, I think if you talk about the global stage, it's going to be really important who his foreign minister and his defense minister are. One thing that really rocked Starmer in the final days was John Healey's resignation, because he was really well liked on the international stage. And people saw Healey's resignation not as politics, not as trying to get one up on Starmer. They saw it as a departure on almost a point of principle.
On principle.
And that is...
Well, maybe, I mean, if Andy Burnham comes up with the money, maybe John Healey will take that job back.
But then we go full circle, because what no one would fully say is the reason why you don't have the money for defense is because you don't have the money with government revenues having taken the hit that they've taken in recent years. There's a smaller pie, which is there for everything that we're trying to divide it up in.
So that was Scott Lucas, who I spoke to earlier. He's the founder and editor of EA Worldview and a professor of international politics. Got a message here from Anne, who says, we're only ungovernable by those who ignore what we voted for, as all have done for decades. Until they do, they will not be accepted. Quick break and back to your calls in just a moment.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, good morning. This is Talk, and it is Petrie, and this is your Talkback Hour. And we're talking about, obviously, getting another Prime Minister in a few weeks' time. Could be by July 15th. We would have a new Prime Minister, and it looks likely, almost definitely, to be Andy Burnham. So, what are we in for? Who knows? Let's talk to Paul now, who's in Liverpool. Good morning, Paul.
Good morning, Patsy. How are you, babe?
Great. Are you excited about a new Prime Minister?
Not so much, really.
No.
I mean, what's doing my head now is everyone's going on about 7 Prime Ministers, but it's only been one Labour one so far.
Yeah, true.
You know what I mean?
Well, but it will be 2 Labour. Well, yeah, I know.
Yeah.
But it is on both sides that this is happening now.
Oh, yeah, it's a joke, it is. It's turned into a joke.
It really is embarrassing, isn't it?
Going on about Labour and it's 7, but it's, 5 for Tory and 2, but that doesn't matter. What matters is what the people think, and we don't get what the people want. Whoever it is, whoever's running the NHS, the nurses aren't getting the money properly, or the doctors.
Yeah.
You know what I mean, I've been in hospital a lot lately, and like I said, it's administrators who are taking the money and doing whatever they do with it, you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's all the clipboard Johnnies and the managers, isn't it?
Exactly. Instead of the nurses and the doctors and whatever else, you're talking about the police, someone else. The military, the way they've been cut back.
Yeah.
I mean, it was getting cut back when Thatcher was in, and they were going to lose another aircraft carrier, and luckily we didn't, because it was said if we would have, we wouldn't have got the Falklands back when the Tories, when the Argies invaded, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Luckily it didn't happen. But they're talking, they're still making cutbacks on anything and everything.
Yeah, where does all our money go?
I don't know. He has cut back on some of the boats coming in. I'll give him that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But, everything else, you're not even allowed to go on protests if you're English. Otherwise, you're racist. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I've been on the protest myself, and because I got the flag of St George as well outside my house like that for about 5 years flying. People said to me about having it up and that. And I said, I don't care. Call me what you want. You've got the Palestinians. They march through central London, thousands of them with the Palestinian flag. But like you said, as for the Prime Ministers, I just don't know what the answer is. I don't know what's Andy Burnham. He done some good things. He helped.
But he didn't do all good things.
No, he helped
in Manchester. He really hasn't. And everybody's sort of glorifying this man.
Exactly.
You wait till he's Prime Minister, all of the front pages will be what a disaster he was for Manchester. You wait.
Yeah, I'm saying he helped us when the Liverpool fans, the 96, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
He did help the supporters. I'm a Blue, by the way. And he did help the Liverpool fans, turn over what they were being called and everything, you know what I mean?
And he helped a lot with the Manchester bomb, the arena bombing as well. He was really good at bringing people together then. So, look, he does have form for being a decent bloke. And he is northern, which is good, because, north of the Watford Gap, we know that the rest of the country isn't as well looked after. We know that.
No, definitely not, you know what I mean? But like I said, as for the answer, I honestly don't know, you know what I mean? All I can say is, like I said, they're not all Labour Prime Ministers. But like I said, they're all as bad as each other, you know what I mean?
I think they are. And I do think that a lot of people have been pointing out this morning that this because they overpromise. They don't treat us like adults. They go, oh, you can all have a unicorn if you vote for us. And we go, oh, great, I'd love my own unicorn. And then they get voted in and we don't get one. And we're disappointed because we believe the lies. So we've got to grow up a bit as well.
That's it. Here's your bag of sweeties.
Yeah, we've got to grow up as well. We've got to start asking these people proper questions before we vote for them.
Exactly. I mean, I'm 60 now, you know what I mean? I've seen one or two of them come and go.
Yeah.
And then,
They're all disappointing.
I've seen a lot come and go, and to tell you the truth, I never liked Thatcher because she was Tory, but like I said, Tony Blair, I liked him at first, you know what I mean? And he promised this and he promised, and he came out with some things, but then he was as bad, you know what I mean, at the end of the day, you know what I mean?
Yeah, they all